Chapter 968. Hey, Sister Ding Xiang. Why are you in our house? On Sunday morning, after washing up, Cece, who was in high spirits, bounced down the stairs with her father. When she saw that there was someone else in the kitchen, it wasn't her mother, but Ding Xiang, she asked in surprise. Sister Ding Xiang came back very late last night, and she was in a hurry to make the cake. She had no place to buy ingredients, so she borrowed our kitchen. It was Murphy who answered. Murphy was holding a bowl of vegetable and lean meat porridge, running around behind Tong Tong, who was giggling. Murphy was right. Ding Xiang came back to the airport at midnight last night. Guazi was worried about his girlfriend, so he contacted Yang Yi. Yang Yi was not arrogant, so he drove to pick up his friend. On the way, Ding Xiang said that she wanted to make some cakes in the morning and bring them to Guazi's house. However, there was a problem. Ding Xiang had no place to buy ingredients in the middle of the night, and she had to get up early the next morning to prepare the cake. The sooner she could make the cake, the sooner she could go to Guazi's house. Luckily, Ding Xiang had a group of good friends. Although she and Yang Yi did not have ingredients in their house, Yang Yi's house did. Therefore, Yang Yi took Ding Xiang home and let her use his kitchen in the morning. It was not a big deal, and there would not be any misunderstanding. After all, Yang Yi was an honest person. Moreover, Murphy was at home. Is that so? After Cece found out, she went to the kitchen excitedly and curiously watched Ding Xiang being busy. She had never seen Ding Xiang make a cake before. The last time Yang Yi went on a business trip, Ding Xiang had not made a cake when she was their nanny at home. Shishi, do you like to eat cake? Come and try this. You guys should like this matcha flavored cake or this chocolate flavored cake. When Ding Xiang saw the lovely Shishi, a smile appeared on her nervous face. She hurriedly brought out a small plate and served Shishi the cake she had already made. Although she had learned from Yang Yi, Ding Xiang's culinary skills had improved tremendously over the past few years. Not only could she make all kinds of small cakes now, but she could also make them exquisite. They were even smaller than the cupcakes she used to make. Shishi could bite into them one by one. They looked especially tempting. Really? Papa, can I eat it? Shishi looked at these beautiful little cakes, and the little girl who was a little obsessed with looks was moved. She blinked her eyes, turned to look at her father, and asked expectantly, "You can eat it? Your sister Ding Xiang made quite a lot of cakes. I don't think we can bring so many cakes over." Yang Yi glanced at the table and said with a smile, "But you have to drink some water first." Ding Xiang did make a lot of cakes, and they filled the table. Not only were there soft cakes, but she also made a blueberry jelly cheesecake and some pudding mousse cups with different flavors. Yang Yi only realized that Ding Xiang had done so much work when he saw it. No wonder when Yang Yi got up at 4 o'clock in the morning to practice boxing, he saw Ding Xiang busy in the kitchen. After a while, Shishi tasted the cake made by Ding Xiang. Under Ding Xiang's expectant gaze, she nodded vigorously with her eyes shining and said, "It's delicious, so delicious." Ding Xiang secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Since Shishi thought it was delicious, she was relieved. She was afraid that she would make a defective product and bring it over, which would be embarrassing. However, when she was thinking about what to say when she went to Guazi's house, Shishi ate the small piece of pudding mousse in her hand and asked sweetly, "Sister Ding Xiang, can I have a little bit?" Ding Xiang came back to her senses and said to Shishi with a smile, "Of course, do you still like it? Then you can pick some, but put them in the fridge." No, I want to eat it." Shishi pointed outside and clarified in a clear voice, "Xanair wants to eat it. She likes cake very much." "Shishi, let me ask you a question. How many gold coins does Xanair have now?" According to the agreement, Ding Xiang arrived at Guazi's house at about 10 o'clock, which was located in the municipal government family compound in Wuhu district. Tan Huizhen had already told the guards. After Ding Xiang reported the purpose of her visit, someone let her in. After all, it was the place where the mayor of the provincial capital lived. Ding Xiang quickly saw a small two-story bungalow with a single door and yard. The yard was not big, but there were flowers and plants. Even in winter, it was full of vitality. Of course, compared with Yang Yi's house, this old-fashioned house built in the 1990s was not luxurious at all. However, this was Guazi's house after all. Ding Xiang suddenly became nervous and did not dare to breathe. Ding Xiang, you're here? Welcome, welcome. Oh, I'm really sorry that I have to trouble you to come here for Zi. The courtyard door opened, and Tan Huizhen came out to greet him with a smile on her face. She spoke very politely. Until now, Tan Huizhen still only regarded Ding Xiang as Guizi's colleague. After all, she was the one who had troubled others. It was normal for her to be polite. However, Ding Xiang was a little confused by her enthusiasm and did not know how to respond. At this time, Tan Huizhen saw the cake box in Ding Xiang's hand and frowned slightly. Her tone became a little reproachful as she said, Ding Xiang, look at you. Why did you bring something when you came? Let me tell you, you have to take all of them back later. Ding Xiang was stunned. This is not directed at you. Our old Gua has set a rule that he does not accept gifts from others. Therefore, those officials who come to our house have to come empty-handed. Tan Huizhen realized that she might be a little too serious. She smiled and explained, but you're not an official. Otherwise, I would have to chase you out with so many gifts. Ding Xiang looked embarrassed and stood there with the cake in her hand. She did not know what to do and could only stammer. Auntie, I'm sorry. I really don't know these rules. I thought that since it's my first time here, I brought you some cakes that I made myself. Tan Huizhen looked at Ding Xiang's flustered appearance and thought of the student magazine report on Ding Xiang's background that she had seen on Guizi's desk. She could not help but feel a little pity for her. This was an honest girl. Hey Ding Xiang, do you think Auntie has become muddle-headed? Tan Huizhen laughed and said, I treat you the same as other people who come to your Uncle Gua's house to do things. I forgot that you were invited here by Auntie. Come in and talk. She recovered her initial enthusiasm and even reached out to help Ding Xiang carry the cake. She said with a smile, You made a cake for us? How embarrassing is that? Today, I'll have to trouble you to help Auntie bring some clothes and tonics to Z. Auntie wanted to treat you to lunch at home. I didn't expect to trouble you to make a cake. Auntie, I'll do it. Don't say that. It's not troublesome. Besides, this is my job. Ding Xiang hurriedly stopped Tan Huizhen and followed her in with the cake. Auntie, you can call me Xiao Ding. That's what everyone calls me. Chapter 969. But I only have 1 gold coin. Lan Xian's weak voice sounded in Yang Yi's villa. Not long after Ding Xiang went out to take the test, Lan Xian, who had eaten breakfast, came to the house. Since her little friend came to play, she naturally wanted to share the delicious food with Lan Xian. But in the face of so many delicious cakes, Lan Xian was in a dilemma. She tilted her head and thought for a moment, and asked with some doubts, Xian, but didn't you tell me that you have a lot of gold coins? Then this week, you didn't come to our house to eat. This week, because Lan Zhoukai was at home and took the little girl to eat a big meal every day, Lan Xian certainly didn't need to go to Yang Yi's house to eat. Yang Yi came over and just saw Lan Xian calculating with Shi. Yes, I originally had 5 gold coins. It was a lot, but I went to watch TV. Lan Xian also said with conviction. Yesterday was boring. I went out to play with my father, but he didn't go out to play. He was talking with others, and then I was bored to death. Lan Xian didn't finish her story. She was bored outside and came back to watch TV. Then how much TV did you watch? Now the remaining gold coins are not enough to eat? Yang Yi asked with some amusement. I watched it for a long time, and my mother took 4 gold coins from me. Lan Xian said sullenly. If I had known, I wouldn't have watched TV. I want to eat cake. Wu Jingjing was very strict with Lan Xian, and urged Lan Xian to exercise every day. Now, although Lan Xian still looked fat, she had lost 6 pounds compared to before. Her little face was not as round as before, and she felt a little thin. However, Lan Xian had one advantage. Although she sometimes liked to think of some lazy tricks, she was still a very honest child. With only 1 gold coin left, even Yang Yi couldn't go to her house to check. Lan Xian also wouldn't lie to Yang Yi and Shi that she had a lot left. Then what should I do? You can't eat the cake if you don't have 3 gold coins. She was also very honest. She pulled open Lan Xian's wound and said it. Yang Yi couldn't bear to see Lan Xian drooling as she stared at the cake on the table. She looked so aggrieved and helpless that she couldn't eat it. Yang Yi thought for a while and said, "Actually, these cakes were not made by me. They were made by your sister Ding Xiang, so according to our previous agreement, you can eat these cakes without gold coins." Really? Lan Xian reacted quickly. She suddenly raised her head and asked excitedly. The little girl's round eyes seemed to be bursting with light at this moment. Yang Yi smiled and said, "Of course. However, there is a small problem. If you eat Sister Ding Xiang's cake, shouldn't you thank Sister Ding Xiang?" At this moment, Lan Xian's mind was only left with the thought of eating cake, eating cake. Whatever Yang Yi said, she nodded fiercely. She was waiting for him to finish so that she could eat to her heart's content. "But how are you going to thank Sister Ding Xiang? She made so many delicious cakes for you guys?" Yang Yi asked with a smile. And Lan Xian looked at Yang Yi in confusion, not knowing how to answer. She was listening at the side. She was happy for her little friend. Hearing her father's question, she also actively wanted to give her little friend ideas. Xian, you can kiss Sister Ding Xiang. I kissed Sister Ding Xiang this morning," she said enthusiastically. She even hugged Lan Xian's shoulder and kissed her on the side of her face. She giggled and said, "Just like this." Lan Xian felt that this was indeed a good idea. She was overjoyed and grinned. She waved her hand and said, "Then I'll kiss Sister Ding Xiang too. I won't just kiss once, I'll kiss 10 times. As long as it wasn't gold coins, these small expenses were nothing to this lady. Yang Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He quickly pulled them and said, "You can't kiss Sister Ding Xiang. Sister Ding Xiang still has important things to do. She won't come back here." "Then what should we do?" She felt anxious for her little friend. Yang Yi said that just now, of course, there was a deep meaning behind it. He smiled and said, "How about this later, after Xian finishes eating the cake? We'll learn a dance together. We'll record a video and send it to Sister Ding Xiang, okay? Your sister Ding Xiang loves dancing the most. You see, she came to watch Shishi's competition last week, right?" Shishi felt that her father's words seemed to make sense. She quickly nodded. She, who liked dancing, was more enthusiastic. She said happily, "I want to learn too. I'll dance with Xian. But I don't know how to dance." Lan Xian was in a dilemma. "Yes, this dance is relatively simple. Let me tell you, even cats can dance," Yang Yi said seriously. "Even cats can dance?" Murphy followed Tong Tong to the dining room. She happened to hear the conversation between Yang Yi and the children. She asked in surprise, "What kind of dance is this? Don't tell me they're going to do the catwalk like models?" "It's okay. You'll see it later. Xian, you eat the cake first. Uncle will record the accompaniment." Yang Yi had ready-made material in his mind, and he didn't need to make the song very detailed. He should be able to finish it quickly. So, he hurriedly said something and turned to go upstairs to the recording studio. In order to let Lan Xian exercise after eating the cake, he had put in a lot of effort. She was very happy. She took Lan Xian's hand and jumped on the ground. She said, "Great, Xian, we can dance together." Lan Xian still felt that she couldn't dance, but for Lan Xian, other things were nothing. As long as there was delicious food, everything was negotiable. After seeing Uncle Yang leave, Lan Xian immediately turned her gaze to the cake that she had been craving for a long time. Back at the Guo family's house, Tan Huizhen watched as Ding Xiang opened the packaging and placed the cakes on the table one by one. "Little Ding, did you make all these cakes?" Tan Huizhen exclaimed. "Yes, Auntie. Try them and see if they're delicious." Ding Xiang nodded shyly. Okay, I'll try some." Tan Huizhen agreed with a smile. At this time, a head popped out from the second floor. Guozian heard the noise downstairs and sneaked down. When she saw the cake, she shouted excitedly, "Wow! Sister Ding Xiang, you brought cake? I want to eat it too." "Hurry up and do your homework after eating. Stop procrastinating." Tan Huizhen couldn't scold her daughter in front of outsiders, so she just said this. "Oh, it's delicious. No wonder my brother likes to eat the cakes you make." I heard that Sister Ding Xiang made a lot of cakes when you were still a waitress at Brother Yang's coffee shop. My brother often went to buy them to eat. Guozian was full of praise as she ate. She almost spilled the beans. Luckily, she covered it up. Then eat more. You're in high school, so it's a time when you need a lot of energy. Also, the food in school isn't as good as at home. Ding Xiang helped to move the plate to Guozian, who was wolfing down the cake, as if she was afraid that she couldn't reach it. Tan Huijin ate more modestly. Like a lady from a wealthy family, she ate slowly with a small silver spoon. Ding Xiang, don't worry about her. Sit down and talk. Tan Huijin waved at Ding Xiang. Unconsciously, Tan Huijin wanted to protect Ding Xiang. After all, who wouldn't like a hard-working, enthusiastic, and good-looking girl? Chapter 970. At noon, Tan Huijin asked Ding Xiang to stay for lunch at home as she had promised. However, Ding Xiang couldn't show off her culinary skills because the Guo family also hired a housekeeper. To be precise, it was a part-time housekeeper that Tan Huijin hired from her hometown. She was an auntie that she knew well, and she would come every morning during lunch. Naturally, even if there wasn't anyone cooking, Tan Huijin wouldn't treat her guests to a meal, and even let them cook. Ding Xiang ate the meal nervously, because Guo Zhengyan also came back for lunch. Mayor Guo also had work on the weekends, but he was a little more free than usual. On Sunday, after finishing some official business in the morning, if there was no emergency, he would arrange for an afternoon break to read books. Guo Zhengyan was much more imposing than Tan Huijin. Sitting opposite him, Ding Xiang felt like she was being stared at by a tiger. She didn't even dare to breathe or make any big movements. On the other hand, when Tan Huijin saw that Ding Xiang only knew how to eat, she even told Ding Xiang to eat more. Don't just focus on losing weight. I know that you young people want to lose weight, but what do you look like if you're all so skinny? Eat more meat and eat more vegetables. Guozian also took care of Ding Xiang. She could tell that Ding Xiang was nervous, so she even picked up some vegetables for her and smiled. Sister Ding Xiang, look at my mother's words. Now you know why my brother and I became fat, right? Guo Zhengyan also saw Ding Xiang's nervousness. He thought that his habitual stern face had scared the guest, so he picked up a napkin from the table, wiped his mouth and started a conversation with Ding Xiang. Little Ding, are you from Xiangxi? Where are you from? Ding Xiang immediately straightened her back and replied, Uncle Guo, I'm from Xiangxi's Maota City, Yinya County. Maota City. Guo Zhengyan pondered for a moment before gently nodding his head and said, I have some recollection of it. About 10 years ago, something happened over there. The country's poverty alleviation fund was misappropriated. At that time, the ministry sent a group of people to investigate. I didn't go, but I heard that it was a huge matter. Some of the leaders in Xiangxi were even removed. Ding Xiang opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She didn't know how to continue the conversation. More than 10 years ago, she was still studying in the mountains. She didn't know how big the world was and how exciting it was. How could she have known about the affairs of those officials? Don't talk about work as soon as you get home. Tan Huijin, on the other hand, spoke up for Ding Xiang. How could these children know about what you said? However, Guo Zhengyan did not agree with Tan Huijin's words and sternly said, Young people, you can't always put your energy into the entertainment industry. You have to understand more about family affairs, the country, and the world. Uncle Guo is right. I really don't know much about it. I have to watch the news more in the future. Ding Xiang didn't defend herself and admitted her mistake honestly. As a matter of fact, that was the case. She usually followed Yang Huan and the others and read more gossip. I heard from Zi that your hometown is still in the Meng Stockade village on the mountain? Guo Zhengyan continued to ask, Have you solved the traffic problem in the mountain? No matter where you are, if you want to get rid of poverty and become rich, the first problem you have to solve is the traffic problem. Ding Xiang could answer this question. After all, it was something she had experienced. Ding Xiang answered honestly, Yes, it's because the road can't be repaired. In our stockade, we can't sell our mountain goods. Actually, everyone's lives are a little isolated from the rest of the world. Although we have a phone connection now, we still don't have a source of income. In recent years, The country has been working on a rural road policy. There's financial support. Guo Zhengyan wanted to say that there was a solution, but soon he thought of some of the problems in the middle. He sighed softly and said, "However, there are too many monks and too little gruel. I don't think your hometown will be able to apply for the approval. Even if the application is approved, it might not be implemented." Speaking of this, Ding Xiang was a little depressed and accidentally vented some of her emotions. However, she soon realized that she couldn't show too much negative energy, so she quickly stopped. But who was Guo Zhengyan? In the past, he had been in the discipline inspection work for so many years, so he could catch Ding Xiang's mood very accurately. He was keenly aware that there was a problem, so he frowned and asked, "Ding, why do you say that?" Ding Xiang hesitated, not knowing how to explain. Moreover, she was a little worried that if the Guo family knew about the things in her hometown, would they have some negative opinions about her hometown? Guo Ziyan was eating at the side and observing their expressions. Today, she was going to help Ding Xiang get through this difficult situation. Even if she didn't have the chance to cheat Guo Ziyan was willing to help Ding Xiang. After all, she did have a good impression of Ding Xiang. Moreover, Ding Xiang's cake was really delicious, which was a plus in Guo Ziyan's heart. "It's like this," Guo Ziyan said. Sister Ding Xiang's family's previous leader was very bad. He embezzled the fees of many village teachers and didn't send teachers to the children in the mountains. Sister Ding Xiang worked hard to earn some money and sent it back home so that they could hire better teachers for the children. In the end, they embezzled it too. Guo Ziyan rambled on and told them about Ding Xiang's situation. Ding Xiang wanted to stop her, but it was too late. Ding Xiang's money was embezzled too? Tan Huizhen asked in surprise. "What's going on? Why did Ding Xiang send the money back?" Ding Xiang had no choice but to briefly explain the situation. Of course, she didn't talk about her own achievements, but focused on the problem that she and Yang Yi encountered. After that, Yang Yi and Guo Ziyi went to Xiangxi to help them settle it. Later, Brother Yang also invited people from the Project of Hope Primary School to help solve the problem of the children in the mountains. He also hired some substitute teachers. Now the children's studies are no longer a problem, Ding Xiang said. However, Guo Ziyan was not willing to give up just like that. She rushed to say, "But I still think that Sister Ding Xiang is very noble. You don't earn much money yourself and you're frugal. You even want to send the money back to your younger brothers and sisters to study. How is that noble?" Ding Xiang said embarrassedly. "I'm just repaying the kindness. In the past, it was the villagers who helped my grandmother and took care of me. After I grow up, I also have to do something to repay them. No matter what, a person shouldn't forget their roots. Ding Xiang, what you did is indeed worthy of learning." Guo Zhengyan looked serious. He raised his glass to Ding Xiang and said, "It's also worthy of learning from me." Ding Xiang was dumbfounded. She quickly waved her hand. "Uncle Guo, don't say that." Guo Zhengyan ignored Ding Xiang's embarrassment. He turned to Tan Huizhen and said with some regret, "There aren't many children like Ding Xiang now. If she didn't have a job now, I would want her to take the civil service exam after graduation. She can take the exam for our discipline inspection department. We need such upright, sincere, and people who don't forget righteousness at the sight of profit." Tan Huizhen said angrily, "She has her own ideas. Don't try to pull her to your discipline inspection department. For so many years, how many people have you tricked? How many good children have fallen into your trap? They don't go home every day and pretend to be mysterious. Don't you know in your heart? Besides, the discipline inspection department is not yours anymore. You are already the mayor. Don't worry too much about things that shouldn't be your business. Otherwise, people will say that your hands are too long." Guo Zhengyan showed a rare smile. He shook his head slightly and said with a smile, "That's true. I won't talk about it anymore." After chatting for so long, they finished their lunch. Ding Xiang saw everyone put down their chopsticks. She subconsciously stood up and helped to clean up the bowls and chopsticks. "Ding Xiang, sit down. How can I let you do these things?" Tan Huizhen quickly shouted. "Auntie, I have nothing to do anyway. Let me help." At Yang Yi's house, Lan Xian finished eating the cake. Her little belly was bulging. She sat on the sofa with Shishi to watch TV. She freeloaded on Shishi's TV, so she didn't need to pay money. After watching for a while, they saw Shishi's father coming downstairs with a laptop. Okay. The accompaniment is ready. Let's learn to dance now. Yang Yi greeted the two girls with a smile. Okay. Shishi was very interested. She jumped down from the sofa and ran to her father's side to watch. But we haven't finished watching TV yet. Lan Xian looked at Shishi and then looked at the TV. She muttered a few words. In the end, she helplessly slid down from the sofa and slowly moved over. Chapter 971. Murphy also came over and sat on the sofa with Tong Tong. She smiled and waited to see Yang Yi's performance. She was very interested in Yang Yi's impromptu dance. Speaking of which, Murphy also admired Yang Yi. She felt that Yang Yi's existence was a bug, because Yang Yi could dance, but not as well as her. However, Yang Yi still had such exuberant creativity. From the initial robot dance to Shishi's Seve shuffle dance, Yang Yi could always give her a lot of surprises. This time, Murphy was also looking forward to seeing what kind of magical dance Yang Yi would come up with. Are you ready? I'll give you a demonstration first. Yang Yi arranged the connection between the computer and the audio equipment in the living room. Then he smiled and said to Shishi and Lan Xian, I'm ready, Sisi said enthusiastically. Lan Xian just nodded helplessly. Yang Yi gently pressed the space bar. Immediately, the sound of a jazz drum with a light rhythm and a clear and simple sound came from the stereo. This rapid jazz drum beat was obviously the prelude to this song. There was only one kind of instrument sound. This was obviously very monotonous, but Murphy didn't care. She felt that this was the music that Yang Yi hurriedly made in the recording studio with a simulator. It wasn't carefully polished, so there was no need to be too harsh on it. But just when everyone's attention was on the jazz drum prelude, Yang Yi had already stood in the center of the stage, with one hand on his waist and the other hand pointing up. Suddenly, the drum beat stopped. When it started again, Yang Yi's singing was accompanied by the jazz drum's lively rhythm. To be exact, it was a monologue without any melody. Like a seagrass, 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 swaying with the waves, seagrass, seagrass. Mo Fei couldn't help but chuckle. This song was too nonsensical. How could it be so fun? Of course, if it was just this song, it would only stun Murphy for a while and not make her convulse with laughter. The funny part was Yang Yi's dance. At the beginning, Yang Yi placed one hand on his waist and extended the other hand. His palm moved up and down. What was even more eye-catching was that when Yang Yi sang, swaying with the waves, he did the action of taking off his clothes and rubbing his body up with his hands. Coupled with his swaying left and right, this action looked a little charming. However, Yang Yi was a burly man. It was simply an eyesore. Of course, he still had to pay attention to the dance itself. Murphy didn't realize it at first. She only thought that Yang Yi's dance was very interesting. But soon, when she connected it to the lyrics of Yang Yi's singing, Murphy understood why Yang Yi danced like that. He was imitating the swaying form of the seagrass. Although Yang Yi's dance was a little eye-catching, Murphy had to admit that Yang Yi's dance was quite interesting. Not only was Murphy laughing nonstop, Shishi and Lan Xian were also watching with great interest. Shishi was sitting on the sofa in front of her father, beaming with joy. This was too interesting. Shishi saw her father's two hands with his fingertips as a knot, swaying left and right. She was so excited that she twisted around on the sofa. She couldn't wait to join her father's dance. The sea of people is vast, drifting with the current. Life is like a dream. My dear, where are you? Finally, it was the few verses of the song that had a melody. At least in this section, Yang Yi wasn't reciting the lyrics like he was reciting scriptures. Of course, to be reasonable, this song was very ordinary. Even if Yang Yi had taken it out, Murphy didn't feel that it was very amazing. But she couldn't deny that this song was very magical. After listening to it once, it wouldn't be forgotten. Moreover, the seductive melody would still echo in one's mind. More importantly, if it was paired with Yang Yi's seagrass dance, this song would become interesting. For example, the sea of people is vast, drifting with the current, like a dream. And so on. These lyrics could be expressed with movements. Although Yang Yi was dancing here, he couldn't twist and turn as unrestrained as the beauty in his previous life. He was still a little unrestrained. But without a comparison, Murphy felt that Yang Yi's dance was very wonderful. She liked her father's dance of "Where are you, my dear?" more. His left hand made a circle in front of his body, and half a heart in front of his chest. His right hand did the same and half a heart. His two hands joined together, forming a standard heart gesture, and pushed towards her. He. She smiled until her eyes were like crescent moons. She was in high spirits and raised her small hands high along with the melody. She also twisted like seagrass, as if she was responding to her father's dance. Lan Xian was much calmer. The little girl sat next to Shi and watched with wide eyes. Although she was surprised, "Can it be done like this?" She was not excited. She might be very tired if she did that. But she was not so excited that she would twist and turn like Shi. Yang Yi didn't repeat the dance. After singing the first lyrics, he also stopped. "How is it?" Yang Yi turned off the music on the computer and asked with a smile. "Xian Air, this dance is very simple, right? You don't have to jump around on the ground too violently. You see, Uncle can twist and turn in place. You can definitely dance too." Shi was still in a state of excitement. At this moment, she ran directly to her father's side and jumped up happily. "Papa, I want to learn. I want to play with Xian Air. This is very interesting." "Learn, you all have to learn. Even if your hands are not standard, we can twist and turn like this." Yang Yi smiled and imitated the way his waist swayed from side to side when he was dancing the seagrass dance just now. Papa, look. She deliberately went to the middle of her father and Lan Xian. She stole her father's sight and excitedly twisted her little, but to show her father. Yes, she didn't know how to twist her waist and how to twist her body like seaweed and tremble all over. But she could twist her little butt and shake it from side to side. It was also very interesting. Murphy watched with great interest as Yang Yi guided the two little girls to practice the seagrass dance. Tong Tong also watched for a while. However, the little fellow was not interested in this. After watching for a while, he got up from the ground and staggered to the computer. "Tong Tong, you can't break Dad's computer." Fortunately, when the little fellow stretched out his fleshy little palm with great interest, and was about to use the 18 dragon subduing palms on the laptop with many black buttons, Murphy found it in time and pulled him back. The two little girls were learning the seagrass dance. It was not clear how well they learned it, but Shi and Lan Xian were twisting very vigorously. At first, Lan Xian was reluctant to learn. She really didn't have much interest in dancing. But with Shi, the two little girls laughed and played while learning. Lan Xian was gradually immersed in this fun. Although the cold wind was whistling outside the villa, the two little girls were dancing in full swing in the heated villa hall. Even if they were just twisting and turning, after playing for an hour, they were sweating profusely. Especially Lan Xian, the little girl was sweating profusely. She was so tired that she drank a lot of water. But Lan Xian didn't complain in the end. She looked at the dance video that Uncle Yang Yi recorded for her, and Shi and nodded in satisfaction. I think Sister Ding Xiang will definitely like it." Lan Xian panted and giggled. "I like it too. It's so fun." "Xian, look." Cici was full of energy. She pressed her two little hands on the sofa and even jumped up and down vigorously, excitedly shouting to her little friends. Lan Xian didn't care about the wonderful scene that Shi wanted her to watch. She was just happily thinking, if Sister Ding Xiang likes it, next time, will she make a cake for me to eat? Sister Ding Xiang is a good person. She can make delicious cakes and doesn't even want my gold coins. Not to mention the two little girls, Yang Yi teased Murphy, who was beside them. "Do you want to learn? Let me tell you, this dance is especially suitable for girls. And it's especially crazy when dancing." Of course, Yang Yi wouldn't say the last sentence out loud. Murphy knew Yang Yi too well. Seeing his evil smile, she knew that this guy was up to no good. Don't try to fool me. I thought of something. You said before that this dance is very simple. Even cats can do it." Murphy gave Yang Yi a dirty look and found fault with him. "I admit, this dance is very simple. But I don't believe that even cats can do it. It's true. Any cat can do it. Yang Yi laughed. How about I find you one? Come on. Come on. Murphy said provocatively. Chapter 972. The seaweed dance was only good enough for children to play with. In terms of beauty, it was far inferior to Seve. In terms of style, it couldn't even compare to square dancing. It was really like a lunatic twisting and turning. Therefore, Murphy did not want to learn it after watching it. However, after Yang Yi showed her the secret of this dance, Murphy really knelt down to Yang Yi. That's right, she really knelt down. She knelt down after Shi and Tong Tong went to bed at night. She had no choice. After losing the bet, Murphy had to learn something, right? The seaweed dance that she could not bear to look at was too crazy. Murphy could not learn it, so she could only. In the dead of night, when Yang Yi and Murphy were flirting, there were always some single people who could not sleep and were scrolling through micro-broadcasting on their phones. For example, Mu Yuqing, the eligible bachelor in the industry, was single on Christmas Eve 3 years ago. 3 years later, he was still single on Christmas Eve. Speaking of which, Mu Yuqing's annual salary was $1 million. He was rich and not ugly. Although he was in his 30s, he was still a high-quality resource. His family also wanted to introduce him to a girlfriend, but after trying to find a few couples, he had not been successful. This was really strange. There were even young girls in the company who were secretly asking if he was gay. Of course, he did not talk about Mu Yuqing's story. He was scrolling through micro-broadcasting and saw that Murphy's micro-broadcasting, which he followed because he followed Yang Yi, had updated a new video. Looking at the cover of the video, it should be a video of Yang Yi hugging a cat. F***ck, this pigeon Yang's publishing speed slowed down because he went to cuddle a cat. Mu Yuqing was filled with righteous indignation. He first forwarded it and then watched the video. The video was less than a minute long. At the beginning, Mu Yuqing heard a fast-paced jazz drum sound. Of course, Mu Yuqing did not have any musical talent. The drum sound just passed through his ears. His attention was on the big, flat-faced, grayish-black cat lying on Yang Yi's legs. Xiao Guai meow? I'll scratch you. Xiao Guai, who was in Yang Yi's arms, was actually very cute. Its face was full of confusion, and its round eyes looked left and right. Xiao Guai's 8-petal-shaped mouth was the definition of confused. Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? Mu Yuqing also felt a little strange. Was Yang Yi stroking the cat? But why was he holding the cat's 2 front paws? Soon a funny voice, Xiao Guai, like a seaweed. The Xiao Guai's 2 front paws was moving along with the song. Yang Yi pinched Xiao Guai's 2 front paws, and his movements were very standard. One paw was placed on his waist, while the other paw was extended, twisting and turning as if he was beckoning. What the hell? Mu Yuqing did not react for a moment. He looked at Xiao Guai's performance in confusion. Then the song, Swaying with the Waves, sounded. Xiao Guai's 2 paws were held by Yang Yi's big hands. Xiao Guai's paws slid from bottom to top, from the sides of its head to the sides of its ears. Xiao Guai's round face was squeezed into a pear face, and its eyes were narrowed into slits. When Mu Yuqing saw Xiao Guai's expression, he did not know whether it was enjoying or helplessly giving up resistance. He laughed very inhumanely. What the hell is this? Mu Yuqing could not help but laugh and complain. This dance, when performed by Xiao Guai, was 100 times more magical. Mu Yuqing did not expect cats to be able to dance, and dance so enchantingly. Xiao Guai's paws were being held, and its soft limbs were being twisted around like a marionette. It even perfectly performed a human posture. Mu Yuqing felt that his worldview had been turned upside down. He did not know that cats could be so showy. Moreover, towards the end, when the novelty of the cat's actions faded a little, Mu Yuqing also noticed that he hadn't noticed before that the cat's lying posture was also very embarrassing. Its big belly was raised just like that. But Mu Yuqing still did not feel that Xiao Guai was pitiful at all. He could not help but laugh. Poor Xiao Guai, because of Mr. Yang's abuse of power, did not dare to struggle. In fact, it had struggled before, but Yang Yi's hands were too fast. Xiao Guai, who could not even catch up with steamed bun, could not escape from Yang Yi's 5 fingers. Xiao Guai's heart was dead, and it could only accept its fate. Xiao Guai squinted its eyes and endured Mr. Yang's bullying in despair. The spectators only felt that this cat was very suffering. Its dance was very cute, and it only knew how to hold its belly and laugh. How could it care about this little guy? Of course, it was not that there was no such thing. Now, under Murphy's micro-broadcast, there were already readers who recognized Xiao Guai and started to comment below. Xiao Guai Protection Association expresses a strong protest. Oh, although I also laughed until my stomach cramped just now. Boss Yang, what did you do to our Xiao Guai? Xiao Guai, my poor Xiao Guai. Xiao Guai actually did not resist? This does not make sense. Doesn't it bully steamed bun all day and have a very wild personality? Oh my god. Xiao Guai, I did not expect you to be such a Xiao Guai. Mu Yuqing did not look at the comments. After he finished watching the video, he could not help but laugh foolishly for a while. After a while, he shook his head with a smile and forwarded the micro-broadcast again. Okay, after watching this video, I realized that the legendary cat stroking is actually so interesting. I suddenly want to raise a cat. Why was the focus on the cat? Mu Yuqing's focus was a little strange. Normal people's focus was still on the song and the magical dance. The netizens commented one after another. It's over. I've been brainwashed by this song. This song is obviously not good. I wanted to scold Yang Yi for not doing his job properly, but I suddenly realized that my mind was filled with seaweed the whole night. What should I do? It's too magical. This video has been replayed dozens of times, but I'm still not tired of it. Looking at the cat enjoying itself, I can't help but want to laugh. What should I do? What's the name of this dance? I really want to do this for my cat. To the person above, your cat says, no, we don't date. Yang Yi is really talented. I really don't know how his brain works. Just a random song and a dance can become popular. Did anyone notice Murphy's laughter behind this video? Am I the only one who thinks that this video also taught us how to use cats to flirt with girls? It's over. I laughed the whole night. The next day, I brought this video to class with dark eyes to show my classmates. Now the whole class is laughing. The kind that can't stop. Even the teacher is confused. Thus, Little Guai became popular on the internet. However, these netizens didn't know that Yang Yi and Murphy had only released Little Guai's cat dancing seaweed video for them to laugh about. They had hidden the seaweed dance video of Shishi and Lan Xian. In that video, the two girls each had their own unique dance. Cece's 2 hands were placed on top of each other. Her movements were as light as seaweed, and her slender waist was swaying vigorously. Looking at the little girl's smiling eyes and small face that seemed to be able to squeeze water out of it. She was so cute that he wanted to carry her away. Lan Xian was not bad either. The little girl danced charmingly naively. In particular, her 2 small hands imitated the movements of the seaweed in front of her body. Her round little belly also twisted along with it. This kind of cuteness was also very lovable. Moreover, although Lan Xian was fat, she had inherited her mother's beautiful facial features. Her face was also a beauty. Her big eyes were sparkling and bright. Her small nose was round and perky. And her small mouth was small and exquisite. Moreover, her skin was pink and tender, as if it had been soaked in milk. If it was just a glimpse, perhaps some judgment would be affected by her figure. However, the more one looked at her, the more one felt that this little chubby girl was very pleasing to the eye. Her round and soft appearance was also very likable. In the video, the 2 girls showed the cuteness of this dance to the fullest. Moreover, looking at their serious expressions, only cuteness was left. There was no sense of madness in the original version. However, Yang Yi wouldn't release this video. After all, this dance was still a little unpresentable. It was fine as long as his family was having fun. It was better not to take it out for those gentlemen to criticize. This wasn't alarmist talk. A few days after Yang Yi released Little Guai's video, there were music critics who used the song Seaweed Dance to criticize Yang Yi's self-degradation after he became famous. They said that he only knew how to play with some brainwashing songs and had lost his normal appreciation of music. Of course, Yang Yi didn't care about these comments. Chapter 973. The old year passed quietly with the laughter brought by little Guai, and a new chapter began in the new year. If Yang Yi had a small breakthrough last year with many achievements in variety shows and TV series, then at the beginning of the new year, Yang Yi ushered in a new round of breakout. The first was the broadcast of Drawing Sword on Central TV. Chun Fengchen had been holding the show in his hands for a long time, waiting to give the audience a big show to start the new year. Next was the second season of the Limit Challenge, which gathered 6 more members and began recording the show. Of course, China Star Production and Shanghai TV station worked together to promote the show. And the second season was unveiled on New Year's Day. Whether it was Zhu Jie's new song, Go Away, or a few short commercials personally written and directed by Yuan Yan, all of them were popular with fans. The popularity of the Limit Challenge was hyped up, and naturally, its advertising and investment work was carried out smoothly. Countless companies were waving their cash to advertise for this ridiculously popular show. It was worth mentioning that the naming rights of the Limit Challenge this year were snatched by a large international company specializing in daily necessities, a Fortune 500 company, at a jaw-dropping price. After all, it involved the interests of many parties, and Yang Yi could not be partial to Sahara Online Shopping Mall. Fortunately, whether it was Sahara Online Shopping Mall or Yang Yi's own Backwave Technology Company, they both won the sponsorship rights in the end. At the very least, they could insert WeChat advertisements in the show. In addition to these TV series and shows that were being released, there were also several projects about Yang Yi that were preparing to appear in front of the public this year. For example, The Shawshank Redemption, which was directed by director Wu Yayan, had been completed. According to the current news from the theaters, it was scheduled for the New Year's Day in February, and it would be released worldwide at the same time. After all, it was director Wu's movie, and it easily settled the screening rights in the Northern American, European, and other foreign theaters. Although it could not be compared to other local movies, it could at least be sold abroad. There was also the new variety show produced by Yang Yi and Jiangnan TV station, the first season of I Am a Singer. Director Hong Yuman had already extricated himself from the cast of China's Voice and started to put in all his effort in preparing for the new show. Of course, there was a detailed plan for the new show. For the experienced director Hong, the preparation was not a problem. The difficult part was the selection of the 6 singers for the first round, as well as the confirmation and invitation of the replacement singers. Why were there 6 singers instead of 7? Because there was already a spot reserved for Murphy. In addition to the program I Am a Singer, Yang Yi also collaborated with Jiangnan TV station on the TV series, In Name. The director of this drama was Chun Fengchen, who had worked with Old Master Chen twice. Yang Yi also recognized Old Master Chen's ability. As for Chun Fengchen, Yang Yi had already informed him. After Old Master Chen read the script, he was very interested in this drama. Now he was just waiting for the filming of a documentary program at Central TV station to be completed before he could take time out to film Yang Yi's drama. Chun Fengchen and Central TV station were in a cooperative relationship, but this did not mean that he could not take on outside work. As long as he communicated well and arranged his schedule well, there should not be any problems. In addition, Yang Yi also had another drama, Yuzue, which was currently in the midst of filming. It was estimated that it would be completed before the Spring Festival. Of course, this drama did not have much of an impact. Currently, it was only receiving a lot of attention from online novel readers. The new year could be said to be a year of blossoming flowers and fruits. However, Yang Yi had basically handed over all these projects to capable people to handle. As for him, he only put more effort into one project. The Frozen animated film produced by Mantis Shrimp Animation Production Company, which Yang Yi had invested in. Currently, Mantis Shrimp Animation Production Company had already started on the adaptation of Yang Yi's fairy tales. In addition to some of the wonderful stories being lined up to be adapted into animated films, there were also long stories like Journey to the West, and short stories from fairy tales that would be adapted into several series of animated series. Of course, rice had to be eaten one bite at a time. Mantis Shrimp Animation Production Company still needed to continue to expand, recruit people, and cultivate animation talents to meet Yang Yi's needs. Even if the animation industry in this world was more developed, Mantis Shrimp's talent pool was not enough for them to carry out multiple projects at the same time. Therefore, Frozen became the first project that was being carried out. After nearly a year of manpower and material investment, its production was now nearing completion. Of course, like every animated film, its post-production required dubbing. Thanks to the development of the domestic animation industry, dubbing actors were still very easy to find. However, Yang Yi was a little selfish. He wanted to dub either the young version of Elsa or the young version of Anna for Xixi, who was very fond of Frozen. After all, there were very few scenes of the young version of the little princess, and Xixi did not need to dub much content. It could be said that it was not a difficult dubbing job. Yang Yi also wanted Xixi to give it a try. Therefore, when Mantis Shrimp's animation director mentioned the list of dubbing actors to Yang Yi asked him to leave these two positions empty and wait for his notice. After returning home, Yang Yi told Xixi about this matter. In the end, he asked with a smile, "So do you want to dub for Sister Elsa or Sister Anna?" "Really? Can I play Sister Elsa?" The little girl looked surprised and did not answer the question. Yang Yi had no choice but to explain to Xixi again. "It's not a movie. It's just like the cartoons you watch. The computer has already created these scenes, and then you pretend to be the character in the movie and speak into the microphone. It's just dubbing." "Oh, it's not a movie?" Xixi was still a little disappointed, but she soon recovered her enthusiasm and said to her father, "Then I want Sister Elsa. I like Sister Elsa very much." "I knew you liked Sister Elsa." Yang Yi smiled and said, "Then it's settled. I'll tell the director that you will dub for Sister Elsa." "Yeah." Xixi jumped up happily, her long hair swaying in the wind. She even happily spun around and hummed a song. "Sister Aisha, let it go. Let it go. Wait a minute, don't be happy so early. Stand at attention and listen to Dad." Yang Yi pulled Xixi and made her stand in front of him. Yang Yi was worried that the little girl would only think about the dubbing and not pay attention to her studies. After all, Xixi was about to take her final exams. Yes. The little girl was still in high spirits. Although she actively stood up straight and puffed out her little chest, she was still smiling foolishly at her father. Looking at the little girl's happy face, Yang Yi could not be serious. He rubbed Xixi's little head helplessly and smiled gently. "This dubbing is after your final exams and after the holidays. Before that, you can't let this affect your studies. Now is an important time to prepare for the exams. If the exams are delayed, Dad will be angry." Perhaps because she was in a good mood, the little girl was very obedient at the moment. When she heard her father say this, she immediately came over and hugged her father's arm. She said obediently, "Dad, don't be angry. I will study hard." Chapter 974. On the afternoon of January 12th, Huijia Primary School's campus was quiet. It had just rained outside, and the raindrops on the trees could be heard clearly as they dripped onto the wet school path. The ding-dong sound was like the ticking of a clock, slowly knocking on people's hearts. Today was the day of Huijia Primary School's final exam. However, in the afternoon, there was only one last exam left for the children of each grade. Xixi and the rest of the first graders were taking the Chinese exam. The final exam was different from the usual quiz. Regardless of the number of questions or the difficulty of the questions, it was much more difficult than the quiz at the beginning of school. The children were all frowning as they wrote. Some of the children who usually didn't study hard seemed to be stumped by a question. They sat there scratching their ears and cheeks, as anxious as ants on a hot pan. The atmosphere in the examination hall was very serious. At that moment, Teacher Li Ruolin was sitting on the podium, but her eyes were scanning the classroom. She would stand up from time to time and walk around the classroom. With such strict examination hall discipline, even the children who didn't want to cheat couldn't help but feel pressured. After all, they were only first graders. However, Xixi's performance was different from the other children. Although she was also trying her best to write her answers on the test paper, The little girl's face didn't seem to show any signs of nervousness. There was even a trace of joy from the corner of her mouth. In learning, Xixi outstanding IQ was indeed very useful. Not only was it easier for her to understand the content of the teacher's lecture, but it was also easier for her to accept new knowledge. During exams, these difficult questions didn't seem to pose a problem for her. For example, the reading expression question that Xixi was looking at now. The question was the kitten plants fish. The content was relatively simple. The main point was that the kitten saw a farmer planting crops. In the autumn, they could harvest a lot of such crops, so the kitten planted the small fish in the field. There were 3 questions. The first question was, how many natural paragraphs are there in this essay? For this question, Xixi only took a glance and could tell that there were 3 natural paragraphs. Of course, this question was not difficult to begin with. It was just a test of whether the child was paying attention in class, and whether they remembered the concept of nature that the teacher usually talked about. The last 2 questions were interesting. The second question was whether the kitten would receive a lot of small fish. Why? The third question was a question of divergent thinking. The examinees were asked to give ideas to the kitten. How could the kitten catch a lot of small fish? Such a question shouldn't be a problem for Xixi. Even Lan Xian probably wouldn't be able to solve it. After all, when they were in Springfield Kindergarten, the 2 girls had done things like raising small goldfish and doing observation reports. Moreover, there were still many small fish in Lan Xian's big fish tank. Under the second question, Xixi wrote seriously, there won't be many small fish, because small fish live in the water, not in the ground. For the third question, Xixi thought about how she could get the little goldfish and suddenly had a good idea. She wrote neatly at the bottom, you can tell Daddy. Daddy will buy a lot of small fish for kitten. This answer. She didn't know if the teacher thought it was right, but Xixi felt that there was nothing wrong with what she wrote. Of course, to Xixi, doing test papers wasn't too challenging. The girl's joy came from the exam that was about to end. After the Chinese exam, she could have a holiday. During the holiday, she could play with her father and mother. After entering primary school, although Xixi still liked the feeling of playing with her friends in school, she didn't like going to kindergarten like she used to. Because after she started primary school, her father didn't ask for leave for Xixi. If he didn't ask for leave, Xixi could only watch her mother fly around or her father go on a business trip for a few days. She couldn't play with them. As she grew up, she realized the preciousness of holidays. During the Chinese exam, the little girl was already excited. She was even a little distracted when she was doing the questions. After she finished writing the answer to a question, she would even stop for a few minutes and be stunned for a few minutes. Her mind was filled with thoughts. When the holidays came, her father said that he would go to Harbor City because Uncle Chin was going to hold a concert. Harbor City should be fun, right? She heard from her father that there was a huge amusement park there. Fortunately, Li Ruolin, who was patrolling on the side, noticed Xixi's absent-mindedness in time. She knocked on Xixi's table sternly, pulling this little girl's wandering thoughts back to reality. Answer the questions seriously. If you finish, you have to check it carefully. After Li Ruolin knocked on Xixi's desk, she walked forward, but her reminder echoed in the classroom. This reminder was mainly for Xixi, but it was also for all the children. Xixi came back to her senses and stuck out her tongue embarrassedly. She quickly started to look at the pictures and answer the last question seriously. The last question was the embryonic form of an essay question. For the first graders, it was still quite difficult. Fortunately, Xixi did it quickly in the beginning. Even though she was distracted for a while, she still had enough time to finish this question. However, when Xixi did this question, it was the last time she was serious about the exam. After she finished, although the girl listened to Teacher Li's words and opened the front to check, the girl was a little absent-minded. Xixi was looking at the questions while secretly looking at the clock in front of the classroom, looking forward to the time ticking away. How could she find a problem with this kind of checking? After 10 minutes, finally, under Xixi's cheering eyes, the hands of the clock reached the position where it should appear, and a shrill bell rang in the school. Okay, every child, stop answering the questions. Cover your pens and put them in the pencil case. Then put your hands behind your back. I'm going to collect the papers now, Li Rulin said seriously. There were some anxious sounds in the classroom. A few children who hadn't finished their questions were very anxious. They were still trembling as they wrote, unwilling to put their hands behind their backs like the teacher said. Cece, on the other hand, was very obedient. It was almost the holidays, and the little girl was beaming with joy. She just wanted to wait for the teacher to finish collecting the test papers, so that she could go home with Lan Xian. Of course, things were going smoothly. At least it seemed so. After Li Rulin collected the papers, she announced the end of the exam. However, children, don't be anxious. Listen to me. On the 16th of this month, which is next Wednesday, please come back to school at 10 o'clock in the morning to collect your student handbook and winter vacation homework. I will then write down your exam results in the handbook, as well as this semester's overall grade, strengths and weaknesses, and so on. I hope that when you return to school next semester, you will have made progress, Li Rulin said with assurance. However, at this moment, not only she, but the children's hearts had already flown out of the classroom. Li Rulin knew that her words were in vain. She would have to send text messages to their parents later. Okay, that's all for today. Children, go home. Be careful on the road. Happy winter vacation, Li Rulin said with a smile. Goodbye, teacher. Happy winter vacation, teacher. The children's responses came one after another. She also shouted, but her hands quickly packed her small school bag. She giggled and skipped towards Lan Xian. Xian, let's go home. The children had all gone home, but Li Rulin was still not resting. She took the papers back to the office and prepared to mark a few papers. She would go back with Lu Xianxian in the evening. Before the 16th, the teachers could not rest. Not only did they have to mark the papers, but they also had to record the scores. The most troublesome thing was to write the student handbook. This was the most important job of a form teacher at the end of every term. It was not difficult to write 1 or 2 papers. The difficult part was to write the comments of 60 students. Li Rulin was still a very responsible teacher. She would seriously write targeted comments for each student. This would take a lot of effort and time. Therefore, before it was evening, she should seize the time to mark the papers. After changing a few papers, Li Rulin found that one of the papers was not bad. Not only was the handwriting neatly written, but she basically did not find any mistakes in the front. It seemed to be all correct. With such a beautiful row of numbers, Li Rulin would naturally pay a little attention to it. This handwriting, if I'm not wrong, should be Yangxi's paper, right? Li Rulin thought as she slightly bulged the side of the box and looked at the name of the respondent. Blank. Chapter 975. There was no name on the test paper. At first, Li Rulin thought that she had made a mistake, so she used the tip of the pen to poke the staples of the test paper and open the test paper. Originally, the paper was just bound for the convenience of marking. After checking, she could just staple it back later. But after checking, Li Rulin found that she had not made a mistake. There was no name on the test paper. Is it Mada who wrote the name? Li Rulin murmured secretly. She had already guessed the identity of the person, but she still wanted to confirm it. Li Rulin turned over the thick stack of test papers. As expected, there was no test paper with Shishi's name. This child. Li Rulin frowned slightly. This matter was neither big nor small. After all, it was just a small final exam. What Li Rulin had to consider was whether she should give Cece a severe punishment. After returning home, Shishi quickly got on the plane to Harbor City with her father and mother. The little girl, who was full of joy, did not know that there was a big mistake in her final exam. However, ignorance was also a blessing. The little girl could maintain a good mood and come to Grandpa whose house in Harbor City as a guest. Wow, Papa, look what a beautiful garden. As a newcomer, Cece was still a little reserved. She held her father's hand and followed closely beside him. Even though she was feeling emotional, she only dared to hold her father's hand and whispered to her father who had turned his head around. If it were normal times, she would have run in the garden excitedly. The villa of Hu Yongxiang, the owner of Tianxiang Records, was not big. After all, it was in Harbor City, where every inch of land was worth its weight in gold. However, the small courtyard was managed by old master Hu Songnan into another paradise. There were flower beds in full bloom and bushes that were neatly trimmed. Entering this small courtyard, it was as if one had entered a fantastical garden. Grandpa Hu, Shishi said that your garden is very beautiful. Yang Yi smiled and praised Shishi to Hu Songnan. Sigh. Why did Dad tell others about my secret conversation with him? Shishi anxiously tugged at her father's hand, but when she looked up, she saw that the adults were all smiling at her. The little girl shyly shrank behind her father, her face red. Ha ha. Hu Songnan, who had more wrinkles on his face, was now in a good mood because of Shishi. He chuckled and his face seemed to be rosier. Thank you for your compliment, Shishi. Actually, Grandpa Hu is just messing around. He has nothing to do at home every day, so he only knows how to arrange flowers and plants. Although Shishi was shy, the little girl had doubts in her heart. If she didn't voice them out, it would be too uncomfortable. She quietly poked half of her head out and whispered, Then why are all the flowers in our house spoiled? Papa swept a lot last year. Hu Songnan couldn't understand Shishi's meaning for a moment, but Yang Yi understood. He smiled and explained for Hu Songnan, because the climate in our house is different from the climate in Harbor City. In our house, many leaves will wither and fall off in autumn, and so will the flowers. They won't bloom until spring. But the weather in Harbor City is relatively mild. Even in winter, you see the leaves are green, and the flowers will still bloom. Yes, that's the reason. Hu Songnan nodded with a smile. Oh. Shishi understood this time. In fact, she also felt that the climate in Harbor City was indeed much warmer. At least it was quite warm during the day. Just as Shishi followed behind her father, and followed her parents to admire Grandpa Hu's garden, there were also several children behind Hu Songnan who were looking at Shishi up and down. They were all Hu Songnan's grandsons, maternal grandsons, and even a great-granddaughter. Among the Hu family's children, they were the youngest. However, the boys were basically all junior high school students. Even the youngest great-granddaughter was older than Sisi. She should be around 8 years old. But she was not as tall as Shishi. She is the little girl who is dancing? She should be. My father said yesterday that she would come. She looks no different from the girls on the mainland. Can she really dance? Of course, these children were whispering in Cantonese, which formed a deep sense of distance. Especially when they heard that Shishi and Grandpa Hu spoke Mandarin. They were even less interested in playing with Shishi. This was not a big deal, because Yang Yi and his family were only guests at Hu Songnan's house for a short time to visit Grandpa Hu. After that, Yang Yi and his family returned to the hotel to prepare for Chen Yijia's concert. Yang Yi and his family's main purpose of coming to Harbor City was to attend Chen Yijia's national concert tour. Of course, it was also the first stop. Chen Yijia chose Harbor City as his first stop, which showed that he still had a deep affection for Harbor City. After half a year, the initial heat of public opinion had basically subsided. Most of Chen Yijia's fans in Harbor City still supported him. Although there were a few extremists who had lost their minds and incited to boycott Chen Yijia's concert, the tickets were all sold out within a few days. It showed that Chen Yijia still had a very high popularity in Harbor City. It had to be said that the paparazzi in Harbor City were much more powerful than those in China. When Yang Yi and Murphy had just gotten off the plane, there were already paparazzi who had taken photos of them. After that, Yang Yi and his family went to Hu Yongxiang's house as guests, returned to the hotel, and went to the concert venue to attend the rehearsal. There were paparazzi everywhere they went. Although Yang Yi was aware of it, these paparazzi were like dog skin plasters, sticking to him like glue. He could not get rid of them, so there was nothing he could do. In fact, if Yang Yi had not asked Mo Shaowan to come to Harbor City and hired a team of more than 10 bodyguards, he was afraid that when they entered and left the hotel, they would have been heavily surrounded by the paparazzi and would not be able to get away. One had to know that these paparazzi did not even care about their own lives for the sake of news, let alone other people's feelings. For the sake of Shishi and Tong Tong's safety, Yang Yi dismissed the plan to go shopping. He only went out of the hotel when necessary during rehearsals. Even when Yang Yi went out, he had to put on a hat and sunglasses for Shishi and Tong Tong. Shishi even wore a mask. When Yang Yi and Murphy had just gotten off the plane, they were not alert, so the paparazzi took a few photos of Shishi's side profile. In the end, the same night, the Hong Kong media exposed it on the newspapers and TV. Although Shishi's appearance was not a secret, Yang Yi was still a little unhappy when he heard these boring people's comments. Of course, the paparazzi paid more attention to the purpose of Yang Yi and Murphy's visit. After seeing them appear at the venue where Chen Yijia's concert was held, they boldly guessed that Yang Yi and Murphy were there to participate in Chen Yijia's concert. Yang Yi and Murphy have a good relationship with Eason. This is well known in the entertainment industry. Moreover, their Cantonese songs are also quite famous, especially Murphy's Qian Qian Ke song. Last year, it was nominated as the most popular Cantonese song of the year. They must have been invited by Eason to come to Harbor City to support him in his concert tour. This news did not seem to be enough to attract people's attention. In Harbor City, where paparazzi were everywhere, if one wanted to make a name for himself, he had to have a strange point of view and a shocking point of view. As a matter of fact, there was a newspaper headline that even attracted the attention of Yi Xiaofeng, the daughter of a shareholder of Tianxiang Records and the general manager's assistant. The mainland singers are so ostentatious. They are surrounded by more than a dozen bodyguards. This kind of news was obviously trying to stir up trouble by using such a luxurious show to make ordinary fans have a bad impression of Yang Yi and Murphy. Yi Xiaofeng read the news and felt that something was not quite right. She found Hu Yongxiang and asked curiously, "President Hu, did we arrange so many bodyguards for Yang Yi? This news is fake, right? I remember that you only asked me to arrange a hotel and a nanny van for them." Chapter 976. Hu Yongxiang took the newspaper that Yi Xiaofeng handed to him. After a rough glance, he understood what Yi Xiaofeng was talking about. He smiled and said, "It's not fake news. Yang Yi did bring a lot of bodyguards. These were arranged by him." Yi Xiaofeng looked at Hu Yongxiang in surprise. "Really? He brought a dozen bodyguards by himself? How can you say he's alone? They're a family of 4, and they're all famous in the entertainment circle. What's wrong with bringing a dozen bodyguards?" Hu Yongxiang joked. "Boss Hu, why did you include a child in this? Hey, I'm serious. At first, I thought Yang Yi was a good person, but I didn't expect him to be so ostentatious like what the newspaper said." Yi Xiaofeng said discontentedly. "How can protecting oneself and protecting his family be ostentatious? Isn't it normal to have a dozen bodyguards?" Hu Yongxiang asked, puzzled. "It's not normal. I'm in charge of the travel arrangements of our company's stars, so I know this the best. Eason usually doesn't bring any bodyguards. Even when he goes out for activities, he doesn't arrange more than 2 bodyguards for him. Even you, the boss of Tianxiang Records, only bring 1 bodyguard when you go out." Yi Xiaofeng didn't forget to tease Hu Yongxiang. "This Yang Yi, isn't he ostentatious? Why are you talking about me again?" Hu Yongxiang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. However, Yi Xiaofeng was indeed a little dissatisfied. Hu Yongxiang touched his chin, hesitated for a moment and said, "Let's put it this way. This Yang Yi, with his identity, it's normal for him to bring a dozen bodyguards." Identity? What identity? Yi Xiaofeng was not as pretentious as when she first came to work, but she still had a straightforward character. At this moment, she also regarded Hu Yongxiang as her uncle and asked casually, "He's a mainland singer. No matter how good he is, he's not as famous as Eason. How is it normal?" In front of Yang Yi, Yi Xiaofeng behaved much more modestly. But like many people in the entertainment circle in Harbor City, she was inevitably influenced by some extreme atmosphere, and felt that the singers in Harbor City were better than them. Hu Yongxiang gently shook his head. "This is something you don't know. Yang Yi's identity isn't as simple as it seems. Of course, I can't say it openly. This is one of his secrets." "What secret? What secret?" Yi Xiaofeng's curiosity was piqued. "Don't ask so many questions. All you need to know is that Yang Yi's net worth is much higher than mine. Hu Yongxiang said with a faint smile. Hu Yongxiang did know some of Yang Yi's details because when Sahara Online Mall came to seek cooperation with Tianxiang Records, Yang Yi was the middleman. At that time, at the banquet held in the evening, Hu Yongxiang asked Fu Jun of Sahara Online Mall. He was very curious about the relationship between Fu Jun and Yang Yi. Fu Jun drank a few more glasses of wine and was excitedly bragging to Hu Yongxiang. He accidentally leaked the news that Yang Yi was one of the major shareholders of Sahara Online Mall. At that time, Hu Yongxiang didn't care. After all, at that time, Sahara Online Mall was just a small company with a market value of a few $100 million. But in the later years, he watched Sahara Online Mall grow step by step. Before it was listed, it was already a big company with a market value of tens of billions. Compared with Sahara Online Mall, Hu Yongxiang's net worth seemed to be really not enough. But Hu Yongxiang wouldn't reveal it. He knew Yang Yi's low-key character. There was no need to leak this news and affect their family's friendship with Yang Yi. What's more, Tianxiang Records still needed to rely on Yang Yi in the future. Therefore, when Yi Xiaofeng asked in surprise and excitement, "This Yang Yi is richer than you, President Hu, is it true?" Hu Yongxiang just smiled mysteriously, patted Yi Xiaofeng on the shoulder, and then walked away from her. Hongwang Stadium in Harbor City. This was an irreplaceable indoor performance holy land in the entertainment circle of Harbor City in terms of scale, geographical location, and historical status. Many singers in Harbor City aim to hold solo concerts in Hongwang Stadium as their career goal. Chen Yijie was the same, but that was only when he was young. Now he no longer felt that Hongwang Stadium was unreachable. After all, he was also one of the 4 singing gods in Harbor City. As long as he wanted to, he could come to Hongwang Stadium whenever he wanted. Chen Yijie, who had held countless solo concerts here, would welcome his first concert in Hongwang Stadium after the incident tonight. It was just close to dusk, and the fire-like sunset lingered in the sky. Under the still bright sky, rows of street lights around Hongwang Stadium were already lit, welcoming the fans who came early to line up to enter the stadium. In the long waiting line, some little girls who came hand in hand were also chatting excitedly. "I still like Eason very much. He should be singing a lot of Cantonese songs today, right? I think he should sing all Cantonese songs. He still owes us an explanation. But I think I also like his 10 years very much. What you said makes sense. I think many songs in Eason's new album are good, although they are in Mandarin. And my favorite is not 10 years, but Red Rose. Yang Yi's songs can be sung as much as you want. It doesn't matter if it's a Cantonese song or not. I like Yang Yi very much. This man is very gentle to his wife, and he can write Cantonese songs. Yes, I also like Yang Yi very much. Have you listened to Murphy's new album? Women Who Get Hurt Easily made me cry. I like Qian Qian K song more. Hey, Miss Huang, why are you always making things difficult for me? By the way, Yang Yi and Murphy are also here, right? Can the 2 of them sing? They should be, right? The newspaper said that they went to Hongwang Stadium to rehearse. If they are not going to sing, why would they make a special trip? I'm more curious about what song they will sing. Coming to Harbor City, they should at least sing Cantonese songs, right? Murphy should be able to sing Qian Qian K song. She sang, "Women Who Get Hurt Easily!" Qian Qian K song is obviously more popular, right? Stop arguing. Let's not talk about Murphy. Guess what song Yang Yi will sing? It should be Love of a Lifetime. It was very popular last year. But I really want to hear him and Chen Yijie sing Better Not to See Together. I heard that they sang together at Chen Yijie's concert in China. Hey, I find that your focus is strange. Why does it seem like you are maliciously trying to find a gay man? A few girls around 16 or 17 years old laughed and clapped in the group. In fact, their thoughts basically represented the thoughts of the fans who came to watch Chen Yijie's concert. On one hand, they were still obsessed with the idea that Chen Yijie should sing Cantonese songs in Harbor City. On the other hand, they were reluctant to give up Chen Yijie's excellent Mandarin songs. This contradictory mentality was constantly intertwined in their minds. Of course, they were also very curious about what song Yang Yi and Murphy would sing when they came to support Chen Yijie. The answers to these questions would be revealed soon. Chapter 977. As the fans had guessed, Chun Yi-jia's concert was basically singing Cantonese songs. Although in Yang Yi's opinion, it might be more sensational if he started with Long Time No See. This was a deal between Chun Yi-jia and Tianxiang Records, so Yang Yi couldn't say anything about it. However, Chun Yi-jia started with his famous song, which still received a lot of cheers from the fans. After that, he sang a lot of popular Cantonese songs since his debut. Although these had nothing to do with Yang Yi, for Chun Yi-jia's fans, it was full of memories. But even though Chun Yi-jia used his unique warm voice to sing, and many fans were moved to tears, there was still a very disharmonious scene in the audience of Hongwang Stadium. Right in front, on the left-hand side, there was an area of about 80 people, and the audience sitting there was silent. There were no light sticks, no support signs, no applause, no cheers, and not even booing. Obviously, these people were the extreme anti-fans. In order to exclude Chun Yi-jia, they gathered together and used some connections to buy tickets to this area in an organized manner. They jointly used silence to create trouble for Chun Yi-jia's concert. Don't think that the small number of people didn't affect the concert, because they all bought VIP seats, and could be seen clearly from the stage. Moreover, the whole stadium was bustling with noise and excitement. There were all kinds of light sticks, support signs, and even mobile phone screens, which lit up the audience into a sea of light. Only this dark area seemed particularly out of place. The surrounding fans glared at them angrily, but no one could do anything about it. Even the organizers couldn't simply drive them away. After all, there was no rule that said that people who bought concert tickets had to cheer for the singer. Moreover, these people were very smart. They didn't booing, nor did they make any dazzling banners, so that the organizers couldn't use them as an excuse to drive them away from the scene. Fortunately, Chun Yi-jia was a very professional singer. His mood wasn't affected, and the concert went on in an orderly manner. During the concert, Murphy even went up to help him and sang Qian Qian Ke song. When is Papa going to sing? In the lounge backstage, Shishi watched the big LCD TV, which was playing the scene on the stage. Then she couldn't sit still. She ran to her father, who was touching up his makeup, and asked him excitedly. Although it was only a few steps away, the little girl was at the age of being lively and active. She wished she could walk with the wind. Why do you want to see your papa sing so much? When Mom sang just now, you didn't even praise her when she came down. Murphy, who had changed back to her normal clothes, said with a smile. I've already told Papa. Shishi tugged at her mother's arm and mischievously twisted her body to the back, and then back again so that her mother could hug her. She giggled and said, Don't say it again. But didn't I tell you that we can't be stingy with our compliments? You have to praise others more so that others will have the motivation to work hard. Murphy smiled. Haha, but I want to see Papa sing more. Shishi didn't move. She made a face and laughed. It seemed that she was afraid that her mother would catch her and spank her. After saying that, Shishi jumped away from her mother with a bell-like laughter, and hid beside her father. Her movements were so intense that Shishi almost bumped into Tong Tong when she retreated to her father's side. Fortunately, Yang Yi was careful and reached out to stop Shishi's little butt. Tong Tong didn't notice the danger. He was holding on to his father's chair, and watching the makeup artist touch up his father's makeup with his little mouth slightly open. Her mother's makeup was nothing new for Xiao Ruofeng. After all, Murphy was a woman and she was a celebrity. Usually, she didn't have to wear any makeup at home. However, once she stepped out of the villa, she had to put on makeup. Even if it was very light makeup, Tong Tong was used to it. However, it was definitely the first time in his life that Tong Tong had ever seen his father put on makeup. It wasn't just makeup. When Tong Tong saw that his father's hair had been styled into a nice hairstyle, he was amazed. He didn't know that his father could look like this. While Yang Yi and his family were chatting and laughing in the waiting room, the concert director finally asked someone to inform Yang Yi that it was time to go on stage. Yang Yi handed the two children over to Murphy and followed the staff backstage. On the stage, Chun Yi-jia had just finished his previous song and paused for a while. He was chatting with the audience. Actually, everyone bought tickets to this concert today. It's definitely worth it. Why would I say that? Because those who are familiar with me know that I rarely take out a new song that I'm still working on during my concerts. Before Chen Yijie could finish his sentence, the pleasantly surprised fans had already started cheering. Chen Yijie's new album was released in October. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be a new song released so soon. However, why would the fans care about logic? It was a great surprise to hear a new song by their favorite singer. This song was written for me by Mr. Yang Yi, who you are familiar with. At that time he told me, "Eason, sing this song. Sing out all the grievances, misunderstandings, and pressure you went through last year in this song." When the fans first heard Chen Yijie mention Yang Yi's name, they were pleasantly surprised. However, when they heard the last part of Chen Yijie's speech, their cheers became softer. Many fans couldn't help but turn their heads and look at each other. Was this a response to those rumors? Although many fans knew that it was hard to tell who was right and who was wrong in some things, their hearts were full of complicated feelings. They would always like Chen Yijie, but they hoped that Chen Yijie would not fall out with the music industry in Harbor City, and not fall out with the people in Harbor City. Perhaps not responding was the best choice, but now Chen Yijie chose to respond. This made the feelings of many fans become complicated. It was all because of these extreme anti-fans. Many people looked at the black area with hatred. It was still a pool of stagnant water. Of course, putting my own feelings aside, I'm also very grateful to Mr. Yang Yi for writing this song for me, because it's really too good. It can be said that it's the best song I've ever sung since my debut. If we don't talk about the future, perhaps this evaluation can be added that it's second to none. Chen Yijie's words finally aroused the interest of the fans. They were all very curious. What song could be called the best? Finally, the music started. At first, it was a very simple piano playing, and it was only one note at a time. It was as clean as a clear stream. But this was just the calm before the storm. Before the live fans could react, the rhythm suddenly became more passionate. Even the timbre became more complex. It was so much so that no one could tell what kind of instruments were used in the mix. It actually gave off a devilish vibe. The prelude was passionate, but when it came to the start of the song, the background melody became clean again. But at this time, the fans were no longer paying attention to the song. They were paying attention to Chen Yijie's singing. If someone asks me, I'll tell them, but no one comes. It was indeed a Cantonese song. These Harbor City fans were all in high spirits. What made them even happier was that Chen Yijie sang this song very well. The length of the lyrics were different, which also gave Chen Yijie space to show off his singing skills. With the lyrics of different lengths, Chen Yijie also sang with different emotions and tones. For example, at the beginning it was deep and confused, giving them a painful feeling that they wanted to bury their heads. When it came to "My mood is like the lid of a wine bottle waiting to be opened, but my mouth is growing moss," Chen Yijie raised his pitch slightly, enunciated the words clearly, and sang the long sentence without taking a breath. However, he was still able to do it with ease. He even sang with a sense of struggle to get rid of it. Of course, the highlight still had to start with "Like a Sudden Song." Chen Yijie's half-high tone and falsetto made the audience feel as if they had flown from reality into a magical mist. They were immediately stimulated by his singing. What song is this? Some people couldn't help but mutter to themselves. But it was too early to ask now. The essence of this song was still like an onion, slowly peeling off for them to enjoy. Wearing the shiniest shirt, acting very emotional. When someone comes to take a photo, remember to put it in your pocket. This line was very exciting. Didn't it describe the exaggerated appearance of a celebrity? They only wanted to wear beautiful clothes and appear very cool and handsome in front of the reporters' cameras. But what was the point? But unfortunately, the rhythm of this song was firm and fierce. It was destined that the fans, who had just started listening, would not have time to carefully reflect on the charm of this line, because the last line was accompanied by a fierce drumbeat. Suddenly, the drumbeat stopped at its loudest, as if the air was stagnant. Although it was less than half a second, Chen Yijie soon welcomed his first explosion. "You think I'm exaggerating?" "Exaggerating because I'm afraid." The sudden high pitch and Chun Ijia's crazy twisting on the stage immediately ignited the enthusiasm of the audience. Not only them, but the 80 people in the silent section were also stunned at Chun Ijia's singing on the stage, which almost tore his whole body apart. Their scalps were numb from Chun Ijia's singing, and their minds were blank. But at this moment, who would pay attention to these clowns? Chun Ijia had ignited the passion in the hearts of the tens of thousands of audience members. It was as if there was a burst of energy bursting out. They could not help but wave the light sticks in their hands with all their might. It was as if they had gone crazy with Chun Ijia on the stage. Of course, what made people feel even more excited was the lyrics of this song. There were almost no repetitions of the theme song in each section. Moreover, the different lyrics were equally exciting and intense. Listen to Chun Ijia singing. Actually, I'm afraid that I'll be forgotten, so I'll exaggerate it. If it's not explosive enough, how can there be a topic for me to praise and become a great entertainer? Wasn't the content very interesting? Wasn't it very sarcastic? Weren't they always scolding him? Weren't they always saying that he betrayed them? At this moment, Chun Ijia seemed to be mocking those people, asking them to continue to create more explosive topics for him, so that he could receive more attention, so that he could continue to be famous. Of course, for those who didn't understand, they might think that Chun Ijia was mocking them. He was going against the anti-fans. But those who understood exaggerated, knew that Chun Ijia was actually venting his own helplessness by singing at the top of his lungs. These were all sarcastic words. Who would want to become a great entertainer by relying on topics? What was more interesting was the last section. You can call me exaggerated, but I'm not afraid of a few boos. I'm here, so if it's boring, do you want to see my performance? When Chun Ijia was singing, although he did not turn his head to face the silent area, it was obvious that the spearhead of this section of the lyrics was pointed in that direction. Hysterical enough, let's shower the flowers with tears, I only want to surprise you. Chun Ijia was really singing this song hysterically. He put all his strength and emotions into singing. To be honest, singing like this was not professional. A song could only be considered good if it could be sung with ease. Chun Ijia was singing so hard that he could not rein in the wild tone. But, under the influence of exaggeration, who would care about being able to sing with ease? What they wanted was a mixture of good and evil. Listening to Chun Ijia's hysterical singing and the desperate lyrics, the fans below the stage, including some girls who had shallow tear ducts, could not help but tear up. They waved their light sticks vigorously, only wanting to tell Chun Ijia that they were there. Don't care about those rumors. We are with you. Of course, even though Chun Ijia was singing so intensely, he did not break his voice at all. Even until the last part of the song, Chun Ijia still displayed his terrifying singing skills. His falsetto was still as smooth and peculiar as before. He could even use his falsetto to produce a scalp-numbing high note. I don't care about your cup of tea. I can still drink to my heart's content. Don't forget that there's someone here to sing for you. At the end, the screams made from his falsetto stunned the audience. At this moment, Chun Ijia's singing was like a demon. The audience was mesmerized. It was true. After a long time, the stunned audience began to applaud with all their might. The deafening applause almost overturned the entire Hongwang Stadium. At this moment, the 80 over people seemed to have been drowned in the crowd, and there was no trace of their existence. Of course, they did not leave, perhaps, they could not bear to leave. But no one paid attention to him. The entire audience was clapping for Chun Ijia with all their might, shouting "Isan" with all their might. They just wanted to vent their emotions from Chun Ijia's singing. It actually lasted for more than 3 minutes before the lively applause and shouting stopped. Thank you everyone. Chun Ijia bowed gratefully to the fans below the stage. Really, thank you for your unwavering support. Actually, I also have something that I have always wanted to say to all of you. Isan has never left. This sentence was ambiguous, but it was enough. Everyone knew that no matter where Chun Ijia was going to develop his career, all they needed was Chun Ijia's confirmation that he had not abandoned them. We will always love you. The audience shouted in unison. But the concert still had to go on, and Chun Ijia needed to take a break. After all, the song Exaggerated consumed a lot of energy. Even Chun Ijia had to take a break before continuing. Next, I would like to invite a singer who will definitely make all of you scream to come on stage and help me warm up the atmosphere. Chun Ijia said with a smile. As if this was a signal, Yang Yi strode onto the stage. Sure enough, as long as the audience recognized Yang Yi, they could not help but cheer. Even if the audience did not watch the entertainment news and did not recognize Yang Yi, when they asked the people around them, they also shouted excitedly. No matter how big of an influence Yang Yi had in the past, at this moment, the audience only remembered that the magical song just now was written by Yang Yi. How could such a person not be popular? Yang Yi and I are old friends. Of course, everyone is also very familiar with his songs. After Yang Yi went on stage, Chun Ijia still pulled Yang Yi and introduced him to his fans. Then he smiled and said, "But you may not know that Yang Yi came today not only because of my new song, but also because he has prepared a new song of his own and wants to bring it to everyone." More than 10,000 audience members were dizzy at this moment and seemed to be unable to react. Am I drunk? Why do I seem to have heard wrongly? There's a new song? However, Yang Yi's affirmative response on the stage immediately surprised everyone. They were so happy that they grinned. There really is a new song. This is more than worth it. This is simply a big gain. Coming to a concert, they can actually hear two new songs, and one of them is Exaggerated, a song that could almost make Chun Ijia reach a new peak. Yang Yi's production must be a top-quality product. The audience's hearts were itching to think, will it be another top-quality song? They even felt that they did not need to be strict about whether the new song would be a Cantonese song, as long as it was exciting. Who would care if it was a Cantonese song? On stage, Chun Ijia officially handed the stage to Yang Yi and went backstage to rest. Yang Yi had just raised the microphone, and before he could speak, there was a wave of applause. Chapter 978. Yang Yi was surprised by the enthusiastic applause from Chun Ijia's fans. Murphy did not receive such treatment when she went on stage. However, he waited for the applause to stop before he thanked the audience in a low voice. Then he said briefly, "Silence is Golden is dedicated to Eason and to everyone here. I hope you like it. Music, please." After that, Yang Yi stood alone in the middle of the stage with the microphone in his hand. His eyes were slanted at a 45-degree angle, looking at the dark and quiet night sky of Hongwang Stadium under the bright lights. It seemed that this figure was very lonely. Yang Yi's performance on stage was indeed not as good as Chun Ijia's. He was about the same as Murphy's. Both of them rarely interacted with the audience. However, Yang Yi was not pretending to be cold and aloof today. He was just immersed in a faint sadness. In his previous life, the man who sang this song the best, Yang Yi, had jumped from a tall building not long after she started listening to his song. She had perished just like a beautiful woman. Since then, there was no longer such a seductive man in the world. There was no longer such a talented brother who pursued perfection. To be honest, this was a man whose greatness and immortality had been proven by time. More than 10 years after his death, new fans continued to emerge. Moreover, similar to Yang Yi, many of Zhang's fans had not personally come into contact with him, nor had they experienced his glory. However, this did not hinder their crazy love for him. Yang Yi admitted that he could not be as great as his brother. However, he was willing to do his best and use his ever-changing voice to recreate his classic in this world. The accompaniment had already started. The melody of the guzheng at the beginning of the song lifted the spirits of the audience. Different from the devilish vibe of Exaggerated, the prelude of Silence is Golden was gentle and soft like an ancient Chinese tune. It was very pleasing to the ears. The night wind is cold, looking back at the past alone. Yang Yi opened his mouth. His voice was somewhat weathered but still clear. It immediately made the audience widen their eyes in surprise. It's so good. Many people couldn't help but whisper to their friends. Why is Yang Yi's voice so good? That sounds like a great feeling. Of course, these whispers would be beaten to death by their friends. Don't be noisy. Listen to the music. The lyrics of this song were no worse than the already monstrous Exaggerated. Just the first sentence alone gave people the impression of Yang Yi standing on the stage. and looking at the cold night sky as he reminisced about the past. It wasn't just the first line. The rest of the lyrics were like pearls. False accusations and accusations, a belly full of resentment and indignation. A reaction to rumors is very intense. It was as if at this moment, Yang Yi had become Chen Yijia's big brother, and he was singing to Chen Yijia about the false accusations and accusations that Chen Yijia had suffered in the past year. Of course, the layman only listened to the excitement, while the expert listened to the skill. In the lounge backstage, Shishi had her hands on Tong Tong's shoulders and was jumping around him. "Little brother, look at Papa! Look at Papa!" The little girl was looking forward to seeing her father sing on stage. Looking at her happy face, it was as if the person on stage wasn't her father, but her. Tong Tong glanced at the TV, but his interest was on his sister. His sister was jumping behind him, so he giggled and turned in circles to look for her. He wanted to reach out and grab his sister's clothes, but Shishi was too agile. She moved around and played with the little guy. Murphy was the only one listening to the skill. She glanced at the two little guys and then focused on Yang Yi. As she listened to Yang Yi's singing, her eyes seemed to be overflowing with brilliance. Yang Yi's singing skills were completely analyzed by Murphy's ears and brain. It was also because of this that Murphy admired and loved the man in front of her, who she was going to accompany for the rest of her life. He was too demonic. Because just a moment ago, Yang Yi's tone suddenly changed after he finished singing the first part of the song. "I've learned my lesson. I've been guided by books and scriptures. Now I've seen clearly, I'm no longer trapped." Not only did Murphy's body tremble, but the audience also couldn't help but widen their eyes. This voice, is it the same person singing just now? It's completely different. Not only the tone, but even the timbre has changed. But regardless of this change, Yang Yi's singing had already made many people unable to sit still. They all stood up from their seats and paid attention to him. How could it be so good? Murphy, who was listening backstage, couldn't help but feel that the person singing on stage wasn't a modern singer, but a traditional Cantonese opera singer. This singing is really too unique. On the other side of the backstage, Chen Yijia, who had just changed his clothes, couldn't help but walk to the side of the stage. He listened to Yang Yi's singing with amazement. He couldn't even sit still. One had to know that Yang Yi didn't show off this skill during the rehearsal. The two voices, especially the second one, made Chen Yijia feel amazed. Chen Yijia stood at the side and couldn't help but try to figure it out. He felt that Yang Yi's pronunciation was very unique. On one hand, he didn't beat around the bush. On the other hand, like the second word, or some other words, some people would naturally lower their tone, but Yang Yi raised it. Not only was this not weird, but it was also extremely good. Moreover, Chen Yijia could tell that Yang Yi was using the rise and fall of his breath to drive the natural trembling of his voice. Just like the last syllable of wiping away tears with a light smile. It was dragged out and trembled, which made his voice even more ear-piercing and comfortable to listen to. Amazing! Chen Yijia couldn't help but secretly exclaim. But why would there be two completely different singing styles in the same song? Even if they didn't see with their own eyes that there was only Yang Yi on stage, some people would have even thought that this song was a duet between two people. Of course, the audience's feeling wasn't wrong. Yang Yi did show off his voice and at the same time imitated Su Guangjie and Zhang Guorong's singing styles, trying to recreate the most classic version of this song in his mind. The version that Su Guangjie and Zhang Guorong sang together at the dinner party. Note, this version has to be searched on video websites. It's a recognized classic. Perhaps the older brother's solo was just as good, but Su's wasn't bad either. Moreover, with Su's contrast, the uniqueness of the older brother's voice was even more vivid. Of course, for ordinary people they wouldn't think too much about it. As long as the song was good, who cared about how many styles it had? The lyrics were just as beautiful to them. Because this song was also written by Yang Yi to advise Chen Yijia, in terms of style and meaning, it seemed to have a completely different attitude from exaggerated. Fate has long determined whether you're rich or poor. What's wrong will never be true. And what's true will always be true. No matter what you say, I'll stay true, and I'll always believe that silence is golden. Here, it was saying to ignore the rumors, stay true, and believe that the truth won't be distorted. Lyrics like "There's justice in right and wrong," "Be careful not to offend others," and "Laugh and scold as you like," "Be free and easy" were all like aphorisms. With just a few words, they expressed the philosophy of life. Why do you have to go against those rumors? Just be free and easy and be yourself. Isn't that enough? Of course, if one thought about it carefully, the meaning of exaggeration and "silence is golden" was actually the same. Didn't they both show a free and easy attitude towards rumors and slander that they should have? Young people, be free and easy. Continue on, be free and easy and easy. In the end, Yang Yi still imitated his older brother's singing style at the dinner party. He raised the pitch of the last "be free and easy" and dragged it out, as if he really wanted to play with his singing skills to the extreme. But the audience under the stage had been fascinated by it. They waved their light sticks excitedly for Yang Yi and shouted Yang Yi's name excitedly, hoping that he could continue to stay on the stage. "Don't go, sing one more song." Unfortunately, this was Chen Yijia's concert. After Yang Yi thanked the audience, he smiled and waved his hand, handing the stage back to Chen Yijia, who came up and hugged him with emotion. After the bustling scene, for others, it might be a period of emptiness. But for Yang Yi, emptiness didn't exist. Back in the lounge, he still had to face the noise of the two pestering little guys. It was time to accompany Shishi to play in the amusement park in Harbor City. Chapter 979. In order to go to the amusement park, Yang Yi and his family had to get rid of the paparazzi first. Now the paparazzi in Harbor City were in a state of excitement. After Chen Yijia's concert, the entire entertainment industry in Harbor City was flooded with exaggerated and "Silence is Gold." Almost everyone was talking about these two songs. Under such a hot contrast, almost every reporter was breaking their heads to interview Yang Yi and his family. However, Yang Yi and his family left after the song. Yang Yi did not have much time left because he was afraid of being pestered by the paparazzi. If he accepted the paparazzi's interview, it would definitely be endless. One day's time was not enough. In that case, Yang Yi would have to make things difficult for Shishi and would not be able to go to the amusement park. It had been 2 days since Yang Yi and his family came to Harbor City to participate in the rehearsals for Chen Yijia's concert and singing. This was the result of a more intensive schedule. Shishi went to collect the student handbook on January 16th, and the concert was on January 14th. In other words, Yang Yi and his family only had 1 day left in Harbor City. In that case, how could Yang Yi break his promise to Shishi because of the paparazzi? January 14th, past 8 o'clock in the morning, Yang Yi and his family had breakfast at the hotel. Then they got into the nanny van driven by the bodyguard and went to the airport. On the way, the paparazzi chased after them. Even when they reached the airport, there were still many paparazzi chasing after them. "Yang Sheng, please wait a minute. Are the two songs yesterday your complaints to Harbor City's music industry? Yang Sheng, did you consider the development of Harbor City's music industry when you wrote such good Cantonese songs? I heard that Fury Records is interested in signing you. What conditions did they offer you?" Many questions were thrown out one by one as they chased after them. For a moment, Yang Yi and his family were as noisy as a market. Fortunately, the dozens of bodyguards hired by Yang Yi played a role. They formed a circle around Yang Yi, forming a human shield, blocking the crazy reporters and clearing the way for Yang Yi. This situation continued until Yang Yi's family entered the airport. The reporters were then stopped by the airport security forces. Even if some clever reporters managed to sneak into the airport with cheap tickets, they wouldn't be able to follow Yang Yi into the airport's VIP lounge. Isn't this a bit too arrogant? The reporters who returned without any success angrily waved their hands. But there was nothing they could do about Yang Yi. They could try their best to smear Yang Yi in the newspapers, but what was the point? Yang Yi and Murphy were not in Harbor City's entertainment industry, and Yang Yi's two songs were still slapping them in the face. However, these reporters didn't know that after Yang Yi's family entered the VIP lounge, they walked out from another passage under the guidance of the staff, and appeared on the east side of the airport where no reporters were paying attention at the moment. Mo Xiaowan was standing next to a black SUV waiting for them. Are you sure you want to go to the amusement park like this? This time there won't be any bodyguards. Mo Xiaowan handed the key to Yang Yi and said with some worry, Don't worry. Yang Yi smiled slightly. The dozens of bodyguards you hired this time are actually no match for me. Anyway, we're going to the amusement park. Nothing will happen. If something really happens, they won't be of any use. After all, Mo Xiaochuan's bodyguards were all ordinary people. After getting into the car, Murphy helped Xi and Tong Tong take off their jackets in the back seat. The little ones wore a bit thick today, mainly to hide their identities. After taking off their outer jackets, there were jackets of different colors and styles on the inside. This way, it still played a certain degree of camouflage. Of course, after the sun rose, the weather in Harbor City was also very good. It was warm and comfortable, so even if they wore less, they wouldn't feel stuffy. Murphy also changed her clothes. She changed her imposing windbreaker into an ordinary hoodie, which made her look a lot cheaper. Just by looking at these clothes and listening to Yang Yi and Murphy's fluent Cantonese, people might just think that they were ordinary Harbor City citizens. The only flaw was that Murphy was too beautiful. Even if she wore a pair of sunglasses, it still couldn't hide her outstanding appearance and fairy-like temperament. Fortunately, Yang Yi and Tong Tong had two natural props to act as a cover, Xi and Tong Tong. There were basically no paparazzi in the amusement park. When ordinary people saw this family playing in the amusement park, how would they think that they were celebrities? Moreover, Yang Yi and Murphy were not celebrities in Harbor City. Their appearances were not as well known as Chen Yijia's. Yang Yi drove the car. When Murphy changed Xi's hair into a more ordinary hairstyle, Xi suddenly looked at her little hands and muttered, I don't like those uncles and aunts. Xi's two actions had nothing to do with each other. She was just bored, so she studied her little hands. Why? Murphy asked casually. Because they always want to ask Papa questions. Papa doesn't even want to talk to them. Xi tilted her little head and said, Papa doesn't like them. Murphy was amused. She patted the back of the driver's seat and said with a smile, Did you hear that? Your daughter is on your side against a common enemy. Yang Yi laughed in the front. However, he didn't intend to let Xi hate a group of people so easily. It was a bit too extreme. He said with a smile, Xi, I don't dislike these reporters at all. I still approve of some of them. What I don't like are those who don't follow the rules. They always follow us and pester us. Their behavior is annoying. Xi raised her little head and blinked her big eyes. She looked at her father and listened to him. For example, the example you told me before. The boy in your class, Zhou Yuxuan, always wanted to peek at your answers during the exam. Although it was against the rules, you didn't want him to see your test paper, so you thought he was annoying and didn't like him, right? Yang Yi said. Yes. But later, Teacher Li told Zhou Yuxuan's papa, so Zhou Yuxuan didn't peek at my answers. Xi excitedly told her father about her progress. This was something she had forgotten to say before. So that's how it is. Then let's talk about the time when you thought he was annoying. Yang Yi smiled and said, Reporters are just like the classmates around you. Good reporters are good classmates. For example, little Fishy is very passionate about learning. If she encounters a problem that she doesn't know how to solve, she will ask the teacher or ask you for advice after class. Xi giggled. Her eyes were curved as she smiled. Little Fishy doesn't study seriously. She especially likes to play. She only asks me when she doesn't know how to do her homework. The little girl had grown up a little, and her thinking had become much more agile. Now, when she talked to her father, she often said witty things. But she didn't ask you in class, right? Yang Yi said. Yes, I can't talk in class. Xi nodded quickly. So good reporters are like little Fishy. They know the rules and won't do things that affect others. Yang Yi said. Dad and Mom prefer to deal with these good reporters. But bad reporters are like Zhou Yuxuan in the past. They always disturb you when you don't want to be disturbed, so we don't like them. Xi completely understood what Yang Yi meant. They don't let us go shopping or go to the amusement park, so I don't like them either. Xi pouted angrily and followed her father's words. But as the saying goes, virtue is 1 foot tall, the devil is 10 feet tall. Yang Yi proudly bragged to Shishi. Your father is still very powerful, right? We just made a feint and got rid of them. In the end, we can still go to the amusement park. Yes. Papa is super powerful. Shishi was also serious and worshipped her father. Murphy sat on the side and looked at Yang Yi in front of her, who was proud of himself. She curled her lips and said, Look at you. Chapter 980. Compared with the famous Disneyland in his previous life, the amusement park in Harbor City in this world was a bit simple. However, compared with the amusement park in Jiang City, the one Yang Yi took Shishi to was much more luxurious. Especially the Ferris wheel, which was more than 160 meters high. When it was built at the end of the last century, it was the tallest Ferris wheel in the world. Of course, it had been surpassed by others now. I want to sit on that one. Sit on that one. When they arrived at the entrance of the amusement park, Shishi got off the car and excitedly took her father's hand and jumped up. She pointed at the Ferris wheel in the distance and shouted, Papa, let's sit on that Ferris wheel. At this moment, Yang Yi felt as if he had been cut off from the world for a lifetime. More than 3 years ago, Cici seemed to have also held his hand like this and asked him to accompany her to ride the Ferris wheel. The memory of that time was especially vivid. Yang Yi had just arrived in this world, but his cold heart melted in front of this girl with an angelic smile. Okay, let's go to the Ferris wheel. Yang Yi waved his hand and announced. Because they were taking the children out to play, there was no need to follow the order of the rides. As long as the children liked it and it was safe, Yang Yi was willing to satisfy Shishi. Therefore, after buying the tickets and entering the amusement park, Yang Yi and Murphy took the 2 children directly to the Ferris wheel. The children need to be accompanied by adults. In addition, there is a problem. It takes about 30 minutes for the Ferris wheel to run 1 round. This process is relatively long, so the children may be impatient. You need to be mentally prepared for this. Let's see if you want to continue riding. Seeing that they were taking a 1-year-old child with them, the staff took the initiative to read some details to them. It doesn't matter. He is not claustrophobic, nor is he afraid of heights, Yang Yi said affirmatively. Tong Tong was a child who had been on planes many times. How could he be claustrophobic? Because it was a working day and Yang Yi and his family had arrived earlier, there were not many tourists yet. Yang Yi and his family had booked a cabin for themselves. One should know that for such a large Ferris wheel, the size of each cabin was not small. The one in Hong Kong could hold up to 16 people at most. Great, this is like a big airplane. After entering the cockpit, Shishi cheered and ran. The spacious cabin made Shishi even happier. She could run around in the cabin and look at the scenery here and there. Hee. When Tong Tong saw that his sister was so excited, he did not want to stay in his mother's arms obediently. He struggled to get down, and when he landed on the ground, he could not wait any longer. He waved his hands like a little penguin and ran after his sister. Murphy wanted to take him to see the scenery, but Tong Tong was unwilling. The little guy was so small that he couldn't reach the window when he stood on the floor of the cockpit. He couldn't see the scenery outside the window. But this seemed to be a good thing. The little guy was not afraid at all in the cabin that was getting higher and higher. He even happily followed behind his sister and laughed happily. Yang Yi saw that Murphy was standing in the middle worriedly. She was looking around, and her eyes were fixed on Tong Tong. He smiled, reached out his hand, and pulled Murphy over. They sat down against the door. What are you worried about? This is such a small place. Where can they go? Yang Yi smiled and said to Murphy, let them play by themselves. It's quite safe here. It's rare for us to have such an opportunity. We should take a rest and enjoy the scenery. Murphy frowned slightly and said, who said it's quite safe? I think the Ferris wheel is actually not safe. After it rises, it will definitely shake a lot. I'm afraid that Tong Tong will lose his balance and fall to the ground. Also, who knows if that person closed the door from the outside? It's so high. It's scary just thinking about it. There was a trace of fear on Mo Fei's face. Of course it's closed. If you don't believe me, you can push it. Yang Yi smiled and reached out his hand to press on the door. Don't! Murphy exclaimed and hurriedly reached out to pull Yang Yi's hand back. Seeing Murphy's expression, Yang Yi could not help but wonder if Murphy was afraid of heights. Thinking of this, Yang Yi suddenly realized that apart from the few minutes when Mo Fei just came up and looked out of the window with little Ran in her arms, she didn't seem to have looked outside at all. Are you afraid of heights? Yang Yi reached out to hold Murphy's little hand and asked softly in surprise. How can I be afraid of heights? Murphy refused to admit it at first, but under Yang Yi's gentle gaze, she whispered embarrassedly, I'm a little afraid of heights, but it's not that serious. What do you mean by a little afraid of heights? Yang Yi asked curiously. It's when I stand at a high place and look below my feet that I'm afraid. If I look from afar, I won't be afraid. Murphy said. For example, I'm sitting here now. If I don't look out, I won't be afraid of heights. But if I look out, I'll be afraid when I'm looking down. Yang Yi understood. He smiled and opened his arms to hug Murphy's shoulders. He held her in his arms and said softly, It's okay. You can look outside boldly. Anyway, you know that I'm by your side. You don't have to be afraid of anything. Mo Fei leaned happily in Yang Yi's arms. She was a little nervous just now, but she gradually calmed down. However, she was still a little worried about the two children. It was easy to solve. Yang Yi smiled and directed Shishi. Shishi, now you're responsible for taking care of your brother. Help mom and dad share the work. Just watch him and don't let him fall. Papa, I got it. Cece agreed straightforwardly. Because they had been sitting on the Ferris wheel for about 10 minutes, the Ferris wheel was rising to a height of about 100 meters. In the distance, they could see the beautiful city scenery and the port scenery. Shishi could spare some energy to help her parents take care of her brother. The little girl rolled her eyes and suddenly came up with an idea. Brother, do you want to stand at a high place? You can look far. Shishi bent down, put her hands on her knees, looked at her little brother and said with a smile. They didn't know whether Tong Tong understood or not. When the little guy heard his sister ask him whether he wanted to or not, he immediately shouted in a loud voice, Yes, yes. So Yang Yi and Murphy saw that Shishi, who had thin arms and legs, was trying hard to pick up Tong Tong, who still had baby fat. Cece's two hands passed under her brother's armpits and hugged little Momo. Using all of her strength, she groaned and pulled little Momo up from the ground like she was pulling a radish. Chapter 981. In fact, Tong Tong felt a little uncomfortable being hugged by his sister in such a position. Not to mention little Momo. When Mo Fei saw that Cece was about to pick up her brother, she quickly stood up and wanted to stop her. However, Shishi was faster. Even though her movements were awkward and a little strenuous, she still managed to pull her brother up from the ground. She straightened her back and used all her strength to push her brother's little feet onto the chair. Fortunately, Shishi was tall and managed to complete such a difficult movement. Seeing that Shishi really carried Tong Tong, Murphy hesitated for a moment, but did not stop her. However, they were still a little worried. Yang Yi also followed them worriedly. He and Mo Fei stood behind Cece, one on the left and one on the right. Once little Momo lost her balance, they could still reach out to help her. Yang Yi and Murphy were surprised by Shishi and Tong Tong's actions. Tong Tong staggered and finally managed to stand firmly on the chair. Interestingly, Xiao Rui turned around on her own, and before she could stand firm, she wrapped her two little hands around her sister's head, using her sister as a safety pillar and hugging her tightly. Shishi giggled and reached out to support Tong Tong's little body. She said, Papa, Papa, look at little brother. Hee, I can't see him. She was not afraid. She just thought that it was interesting. She wanted her father to see Tong Tong hugging his head and squeezing his forehead with half of his chest. Hee. Fortunately, Tong Tong did not intend to stay on the chair for long. After he stood firmly, he still had one hand on his sister's shoulder, and the other hand excitedly waved at his mother. The little guy's intention was obvious. He wanted his mother to carry him down. Murphy, of course, understood. She reached out her hands and carried Tong Tong up from the chair. The little guy was obviously more comfortable in his mother's arms. He happily waved at his sister. However, Cece didn't give up on her goal just now. She stood beside her mother and tugged at her mother's clothes, calling out, "Mama, little brother hasn't looked outside yet." Their seats were almost at the top of the Ferris wheel. It was the best time to look at the beautiful scenery in the distance. "Let me do it. I can show him the view." Yang Yi smiled and took Tong Tong from Murphy's arms. He took care of Murphy, who was afraid of heights, and asked Shishi to come over and look outside the window. "Papa, look, there's a river." At this time, Shishi's desire to show off increased. She had looked outside for a long time, and was familiar with the scenery outside. She excitedly pointed into the distance and introduced it to her father. "That's not a river. It's called a strait. Although it's a little small, there's seawater in the middle." Yang Yi gently introduced to the little girl. It was unknown whether or not little Momo understood what his father and sister were talking about. He stared at the direction his sister was pointing at with his big round eyes. Murphy came over and leaned on Yang Yi's arm. She whispered to Yang Yi, "He's not afraid at all." "Of course, don't you know whose son he is?" Yang Yi turned his head and pretended to be proud of himself as he teased Murphy. In Murphy's angry eyes, Yang Yi used his free hand to pull her hands over his waist, one at a time, and let her hold his waist. "Now you're not afraid, right?" Yang Yi said softly. Murphy didn't say anything. She just hid her head behind Yang Yi's back with happiness and shyness. Showing off their love in front of the children, Shishi might shout shyness again later. In the afternoon, Yang Yi and the others found a very interesting ride. Bumper cars. Different from other small amusement parks, the bumper car project in Harbor City Amusement Park was very large. Not only were there age-specific venues, but there was also a parent-child venue and a circling track. These bumper cars were basically powered by the ground grid. The physics principle was not complicated, but to build such a large venue and ensure adequate power supply, it really required a lot of money. But in addition to accommodating more customers, the large venue had another advantage. That was, it was safer. The age-specific venue could allow some older naughty kids to drive around recklessly, and it could also protect some young players. Of course, in any case, 1-year-old Tong Tong couldn't play this game. "I'll take Bien and watch by the side. You and Shishi go and play," Murphy said to Yang Yi. "I'll accompany Bien. You take Shishi to play," Yang Yi said considerately. "No, I think this bumper car is a bit scary. I don't want to play." Murphy shook her head. "Papa, let's hurry up." Shishi saw that her father and mother were dawdling. She was a little anxious as she twisted her little butt and shouted. The little girl had a lot of fun today. After shouting for a whole day, her voice was a little hoarse. Since Murphy didn't want to play, Yang Yi took Shishi off the stage. They entered the parent-child venue. The bumper cars in this venue had 2 seats. "Papa, put on your seatbelt." After sitting in the car, what surprised Yang Yi was that Shishi actually took the initiative to tell her father about the safety requirements. She also pulled on her seat belt and fastened it. It seemed that although her eyes were looking at the venue just now, when the guide told them about the precautions, she still listened. Under his daughter's instructions, Yang Yi fastened his seat belt. "You take the steering wheel. Papa will step on the gas pedal for you to control the speed. You should practice how to drive first." As Yang Yi spoke, he let Shishi hold the steering wheel. His left hand was also placed on it, ready for emergencies. His right hand was around Shishi's back and on the other side of the car. In this way, he could deal with any unexpected situation. Shishi sat in so many cars. She had been watching her father drive and listening to her father's instructions. She also held the steering wheel like her father. However, the little girl liked to imitate her father too much. Yang Yi, who was skilled and bold, often only had one hand on the steering wheel. Sometimes his left hand was on the windowsill. Sometimes his right hand was on the gear lever. Sometimes he used his hand to poke at the screen to play music for Shishi. Now Shishi also followed suit. She held the steering wheel with one hand, and put the other hand on her small knee. She sat very obediently with her chest straight. "Hold the steering wheel with both hands. You have to drive seriously." Yang Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he corrected her. Finally, everything was adjusted. Yang Yi stepped on the gas pedal. and let Shishi turn the steering wheel to the right. The car started. At this time, the steering wheel was turned back, and the car began to move in a straight line. This was the magical part of the bumper car. It didn't have a brake. When it was stopped or caught, turning the steering wheel to the right was to start moving forward. Turning the steering wheel to the left was to go backward. Of course, after the car started moving, the steering wheel function was the same as an ordinary car. This was also why when the car started moving, Yang Yi let Shishi turn the steering wheel back. Otherwise, their car would turn to the right. Shishi was fine. She didn't think so much for the time being. When she saw the bumper car start moving, the little girl shouted excitedly, "Do do do! Start moving!" This was the sound of the little train starting, "Do do do," that she learned from the cartoons on TV. Usually, Yang Yi's car wouldn't make any sound. However, "Do do do do" is just "do do do." Now our young female driver is driving. Chapter 982. Papa, Papa, let me do it, okay? Shishi was having a good time. Under Yang Yi's steering, her bumper car turned left and right, steadily driving in the field. But after all, it was her father who was helping her turn the steering wheel. Shishi's two small hands were holding the steering wheel, but she couldn't control it freely from the beginning to the end. Soon, the little girl began to be unsatisfied with watching from the sidelines, eagerly begging her father to give her independent control. "Then you try, be careful with the steering wheel." Yang Yi didn't have any objections. He put his left hand down from the steering wheel and smiled at Shishi. The car was still moving forward, and Shishi's excited little face showed a trace of nervousness. Now that she was the only one holding the steering wheel, the little girl was a little uncertain. But this was like an adventure, and Shishi still wanted to give it a try. After a while, a bumper car appeared in front of them. Shishi didn't even think about it. She screamed and turned the steering wheel fiercely. Suddenly, the car turned to the right and crashed into another car. "Stop, turn the steering wheel back," Yang Yi instructed. But how could Shishi care about it? The little girl's mind was blank at the moment. She only knew to open her crystal clear eyes in surprise. And her two small hands were holding the steering wheel tightly. Yang Yi had no choice but to reach out to help her hold the steering wheel, but it was a bit late. Even though he turned, Shishi's bumper car still followed the inertia and hit the bumper car in front of them. "Sorry, I didn't control it well." Yang Yi saw that he hit someone else, and he was very embarrassed and apologized to the other party. However, this was the most common scene in the bumper car field. Everyone was used to it. They smiled, reversed their cars, and took their children to play. "Do you want to continue? Do you want Dad to help you drive?" Yang Yi thought that Shishi was scared, and said to the little girl with a smile. However, Shishi was still in high spirits. "No, no, Papa, I want to drive it myself." Shishi giggled. Yang Yi didn't insist. The air cushion bumper carts weren't fast, so it wouldn't be a big problem if they hit each other. Yang Yi let go, and let Shishi play by herself. However, when Yang Yi let go of her hand and put it aside, Shishi felt insecure again. The little girl leaned forward, and her two small hands left the steering wheel. One of her hands pressed on the front of the car, and the other pulled her father's big hand over to put it on the steering wheel. At this time, she smiled with satisfaction. "Papa, put it here but don't move." Fortunately, there were no other bumper cars in front of them in just 2 seconds. Otherwise, the little girl would have screamed again. At the side of the field, Murphy looked enviously at Shishi driving the bumper car. Even though Yang Yi tried his best to correct them when they were in danger, the bumper cars weren't as easy to control as a car. Moreover, even if you were driving well, other people would still hit you. Therefore, Shishi's screams were very interesting. "Mom." Little Pai was in his mother's arms, looking left and right, looking for traces of his sister in the middle of the cars. However, at this time he seemed to be very interested. He patted his mother's shoulder and pointed at the bumper cars eagerly. "You are still young. You can't play." Murphy pulled the little boy's hand back and waved at him with a smile. "Yes." Tong Tong was anxious. He pulled his hand away from his mother's and pointed at the bumper cars again. Unfortunately, Tong Tong didn't get what he wanted. Even though he really wanted to play, he was still too young. No matter how much he pouted, he couldn't get his parents' permission. Do you want to play too? When Yang Yi came back with Cici, who still wanted to play, he saw Mo Fei, who was looking at him eagerly. He said with a smile, "Didn't you just say that you don't like to play this bumper car?" "That was just now." "I didn't say that just now. Now I think it's quite interesting," Murphy said shamelessly. How could Yang Yi not satisfy Murphy's little wish? Since Shishi also wanted to play again, Yang Yi took the initiative to take care of Tong Tong. "Mom, I'll teach you how to drive." "Do I need you to teach me?" "Your mom, I'm better at driving than you are." "But Papa said that I'm good at driving." "But you still hit a lot of cars." Mama saw it from the side. Before they sat in the bumper cars, Murphy and Shishi started to argue. Listening to their excited voices, Yang Yi shook his head with a smile. He held Tong Tong, who couldn't play in the bumper cars, anxiously pointed at his mother and sister, and was about to make a fuss. "Let's go and see what's delicious." Yang Yi tried to divert the little fellow's attention, but this time, he pointed at a stall not far away that was selling colorful cotton candy and shouted, "Look, Momo, what's that? It looks delicious." As night fell, at the entrance of the Harbor City Airport, there were several paparazzi with a few small bags and cameras in their hands. They were trembling and stamping their legs. During the day, Harbor City was relatively warm, but at night the temperature dropped a lot. The humid climate made people feel even colder. "Is there any other star who has a schedule today? Zhang, do you have any news?" Since they were bored, someone started to talk. However, even if they weren't enemies, there was still a strong competitive relationship between the paparazzi. The paparazzi named Zhang glanced at the other person and said vigilantly, "There shouldn't be any more, right? In our line of work, aren't we all waiting for the rabbit to come out? If there's any definite news, it won't be our turn to ask for it." "Old Wang, if you're impatient, you can go back first." "Hey, I don't have anything to do if I go back. I'll stay here and chat with you. It's much more interesting," Old Wang said shamelessly. "Heh." The paparazzi next to him laughed sarcastically and said, "It's cold outside, so we're here to chat." Just as they were conversing with each other, they suddenly looked at the intersection at the same time. At this time, Yang Yi Murphy and their two children were talking and laughing as they got out of a car. Yang Yi carried his luggage and handed the key to his agent. Then, he walked towards the entrance with his family. "Isn't this Yang Yi?" Zhang, who couldn't help but mutter, looked at Yang Yi and his family in a daze. These paparazzi had sharp eyes and recognized Yang Yi and his family at a glance. Moreover, Yang Yi didn't wear any disguise this time. However, they were all dumbfounded and couldn't believe it. This morning, they saw Yang Yi and his family arrive at the airport and leave Harbor City by plane. How could they appear at the airport now? It doesn't make sense. Old Wang also scratched his head. But soon, their professionalism made them come back to their senses. They raised the cameras in their hands and took pictures of Yang Yi and his family. They weren't regular reporters, so they didn't run to interview Yang Yi and ask for the answers they wanted to know. But whether it was Zhang, Old Wang, or the other paparazzi, they were all ecstatic at this moment. Big news, there must be big news. Chapter 983. Yang Yi used two songs to set off a storm in Harbor City. The live video attracted countless musicians in Harbor City, the music industry in Harbor City, and even the seniors in the entire entertainment industry to praise him. But what made everyone happy and annoyed was that this guy left two songs in Harbor City without participating in any programs or leaving any response, and then slipped back to the mainland from Harbor City. Of course, the real influence covered the whole Harbor City, and it was on the day when Shishi had returned to Jiangcheng and was about to go to the school to get the student handbook. At this time, the mainland media had not yet realized the excellence of Yang Yi's two songs. They just followed and reported the news about Yang Yi in Harbor City. Many reporters were even very surprised. Yang Yi just went to Harbor City to sing, and habitually threw out two new songs. Is there a need to be so excited? Yang Yi's new songs always appeared when you didn't expect it, and brought people a surprise. But the mainland media was already used to it. The surprise was only for the fans. For them, this was just Yang Yi's normal operation. However, they were very interested in the news reported by some entertainment tabloids in Harbor City. Especially the news that Yang Yi's family appeared twice in Harbor City. Many domestic media treated it as a funny news, and re-edited and reprinted it. Yang Yi is playing with Harbor City's paparazzi, and he also knows the art of cloning. Entering and leaving the airport twice a day, Yang Yi performed a miracle in Harbor City. Shocked, the appearance of this star scared a group of reporters to death. Of course, there were also media reprinted a report from an entertainment tabloid that was good at digging out information about ordinary people's micro-broadcasting. This entertainment tabloid, through keyword search, found the secret of Yang Yi's family's return from an ordinary person's micro-broadcasting. Speaking of which, it was quite interesting. The girl from Hong Kong also played with her boyfriend at the amusement park yesterday, but she did not recognize Yang Yi and Murphy at that time. But coincidentally, when her boyfriend took a picture of her playing the bumper cars, he also took a picture of Yang Yi and his family. When the girl in Hong Kong came back at night, she browsed through the photos, selected them carefully, and edited them. When she was about to upload them to micro-broadcasting, she suddenly realized that she had met this family in the amusement park. When the mainland media reprinted the news, they were not polite to the paparazzi in Hong Kong. They directly changed the title to the following. Heartwarming. He racked his brains just to play with the children. In order to get rid of the paparazzi, Yang Yi makes a golden cicada escape at Harbor City Airport. In the article, the online media even joked that Yang Yi and Murphy, the two famous stars of the Gu family, had abandoned their fans and reporters for the sake of their children. The media in Harbor City shouldn't make a fuss over nothing. After Yang Yi came back from Hong Kong, under the influence of the mainland media, he had transformed into a comedian who was responsible for other people's jokes for the week. Today was the big day when Shishi went back to school to get the student handbook. Yang Yi was busy driving Shishi back to school early. Today, she did not need to wear the school uniform, so Shishi could finally wear her favorite dress to school. To be exact, this was a more fashionable hoodie that Murphy had picked for Shishi. It was an imitation of the adult-style children's clothing. Although Murphy was afraid that Shishi would be cold, and also let the little girl wear a pair of slim-fit jeans, these could not take away the limelight of this bright yellow hoodie. The hoodie was very attractive. On one hand, it was lively bright yellow, and on the other hand, it looked slightly special. If it was worn by other girls, it was afraid that this dress would be a little bit too big. However, Shishi was not only thin but also very tall. The little girl's pair of thin and long legs just happened to hold up this hoodie. After Yang Yi sent Shishi to school, when he got out of the car, the lively and beautiful little girl attracted the attention of many passers-by. He didn't know that Cici had excitedly jogged all the way into the teaching building. When she walked into the classroom, the originally noisy class 3 of the first grade instantly became absolutely silent. A group of mischievous little boys were just talking noisily about their experiences over the past few days. In the end, they suddenly realized that a fairy who looked like she was dancing in a field of tender yellow rapeseed flowers had barged into their field of vision. Usually, everyone was wearing the school uniform, and the girl's hair was tied up, so everyone looked the same. But now, Shishi's dressing seemed to have widened the gap between everyone. Not only was there a gap in fashion taste, but it also made people feel that Shishi was taller than them in height and appearance. She had suddenly become more vivid. Where did this beautiful girl come from? She looks like a little fairy. Perhaps many of the boys were dumbfounded at this moment, and perhaps they were also muttering in their hearts. Fortunately, the only ones who were foolish were the little boys who were still in a daze. The girls were only shaken by Shishi for a moment, but they quickly came back to their senses. For example, Lu Xiaoyu quickly came back to her senses and exclaimed excitedly, "Wow! Shishi, you're dressed today. Your dress is so beautiful." Lu Xiaoyu felt that Shishi's dress did not look like a dress, but more like a dress. No, it looks like a dress again. Why can't I tell? Lu Xiaoyu was a little confused. Shishi pulled the hem of her hoodie and twisted it with a smile. Then she simply turned around and showed it to her desk mate, saying sweetly, Actually, it's a dress. Mom said that this is called a hoodie. It looks a little like a dress, but it's very long. Yeah, but you're wearing pants, so I thought it was a dress. Lu Xiaoyu waved her hand and giggled, but I still like it. It's really beautiful. I really want my mom to buy one for me. Buy it, buy it. Shishi egged her on. Buy a dress like this and wear it to my house to play. We can wear it together. It looks really good. I see. Lu Xiaoyu was tempted. She clenched her fists in front of her chest and looked at Shishi's dress with envy. After a while, Lu Xiaoyu realized that she had neglected something. She looked at Shishi in surprise and asked curiously, Hey Shishi, why don't I see Xian Air? Didn't Shishi and Lan Xian come to school together and go home together? To be honest, Lu Xiaoyu was very envious of them. It would be great if she had a friend with her on the way home from school. It would be best if it was Shishi, hee. Xian Air won't come. Shishi said to Lu Xiaoyu. She and her papa went abroad to play and can't come back yet. Her papa has already told the teacher and asked me to help her bring her things home. Go abroad to play. It's so good. I haven't been abroad before. Lu Xiaoyu said with envy. It's also very fun to play in China. Hee little you. Or let me tell you, I went to Harbor City with my papa to play. We just came back last night. We were still playing in the amusement park in Harbor City yesterday. Cici excitedly told Lu Xiaoyu about her experience of driving the bumper car. At this time, the acting class monitor, Chao Ruolin, walked in from the front door of the classroom. She looked around the classroom and walked to Shishi and said, Yangshi, Teacher Li asked you to go to the office. She's looking for you. Chapter 984. Student Yangshi, you're here? Take a seat first. The teacher wants to tidy up these student manuals. Li Ruolin heard the teacher's praises and raised her head. When she saw Shishi, who was dressed so brightly, walking into their grade group's office, she could not help but smile and beckon for Shishi to sit down. Shishi sat down obediently. However, the little girl was like the other children. Her obedience was only on the surface. She was still curious in her heart. Her big black eyes turned around. She looked at a small iron tower on Teacher Lu Xuanxuan's desk next to her, and then looked back. Teacher, do you want me to help you get the test paper? The little girl blinked her eyes as she looked at the two mountains of test papers and student manuals on the table, and asked softly. Li Ruolin was stunned for a moment and said with a smile, Thank you, but there's no need. The teacher can do it herself. She simply tidied up the work at hand, and took out a test paper. She pointed at the handwriting on the back and said, Yangshi, the teacher asked you to come over today. There are mainly a few questions. Take a look first. Is this Chinese test paper yours? Shishi was a little confused. She didn't know what the teacher meant by this sentence. However, she still recognized her handwriting and the answers that she had written, so she nodded. Do you know why the teacher asked this? Shishi shook her head. Look, you didn't write your name in front of the test paper. Li Ruolin flipped the test paper over and spread it out on the front. She pointed at the area on the left where the name was written, and said gently. Shishi widened her eyes in surprise. She saw that the blank area was circled by a few red strokes. She really forgot to write her name. At this moment, the little girl immediately recalled the scene of last week's exam. At that time, Teacher Li handed out the test paper. When Shishi received it, she was still thinking that she could finish the exam quickly, so that she could go to Hong Kong to play. Therefore, she did not write her name and directly started to do the first question. It was true. She really didn't write her name. Shishi lowered her head in shame and sat there obediently, not knowing what to do. She was also worried that the teacher would reprimand her. Although Shishi was an excellent student and rarely got scolded, the feeling of being scolded still didn't feel good. However, Li Ruolin didn't have any intention of scolding Shishi. Her tone was still as friendly as before, but her expression was more serious. Yangshi, the teacher remembers that you weren't focused during the exam, right? If you don't concentrate during the exam and don't write your name, that won't do. Now, because you're only taking a small final exam, the teacher can recognize your handwriting. But what if you're taking an exam in our city, or a small entrance exam? In such an exam, there will be a lot of people. Moreover, the person who will mark your exam papers can't be Teacher Li. Then, who will help you recognize that this is your exam paper? Li Ruolin said. Xishi's mouth was slightly open in surprise. She didn't know how to reply and could only listen obediently. You have to know that if you don't write your name on this exam paper during the exam, you won't have any results. It's equivalent to taking this exam for nothing. The only thing you can get is 0. Do you understand what the teacher means? Li Ruolin said seriously. This is the basic discipline of the exam. So when the teacher handed out the exam paper, he emphasized that you must remember to write your name. In order to leave a deeper impression on Xishi, Li Ruolin also took out a ballpoint pen. Of course, the tip of the pen hadn't been pressed out yet. She just pretended to gesture, so that Xishi could see that her score was about to be crossed out and filled in with a duck egg. Xishi suddenly opened her small mouth slightly, looking at Teacher Li's movements. Her big eyes revealed an expression of surprise, nervousness, fear, and grievance. With mixed feelings, the little girl's big eyes filled with grievance and a trace of mist floated up. Do you know the seriousness of doing this? If it's a big exam and you don't write your name seriously, your score for this subject will really only be 0. Li Ruolin asked seriously. The little girl pursed her little mouth aggrievedly and nodded her little head lightly. She was about to cry. Since she was young, Xishi had always been a good student. At home, her father praised her. In kindergarten, Teacher Mu and the other teachers also praised her. Even in primary school, she had always been the student with the best grades in class. Getting 0 marks in an exam, this was the first time in her life. However, Xishi didn't cry because she seemed to have heard a trace of hope from the teacher's words. The little girl looked at the teacher pitifully, hoping that the teacher would take pity on such a pitiful, adorable, obedient and well-behaved child and be especially merciful. Of course, Li Ruolin didn't really intend to give Xishi 0 marks. Otherwise, she wouldn't have called Xishi over and said such a thing. Last week when she saw the exam paper, Li Ruolin had thought deeply about it. The purpose of education was mainly to impart knowledge and encourage people to improve themselves, not to punish students. Furthermore, the purpose of punishment was to make a deeper impression on the child, so that they wouldn't make the same mistake again. For a first-year primary school's first semester final exam, to a child, it was also the first exam in a strict sense. Deducting a child's marks completely just because she forgot to write her name, this method was a little overboard. Moreover, it could easily dampen a child's enthusiasm for learning. This went against the purpose of education. Therefore, Li Ruolin chose another way to let Xishi recognize her mistakes and remember that she wouldn't make the same mistake again. After Yang Yi sent Xishi to school, he didn't leave. Instead, he drove around the neighborhood a few times. Then, he parked the car by the roadside in front of the school gate and waited for Xishi to come back after collecting the student handbook and winter vacation homework. According to the teacher's previous notice, the distribution of these items and the subsequent teachers meeting with the children would take about an hour. The interval wasn't long, so Yang Yi didn't have to make a trip home. After about 20 minutes, groups of children poured out of the school gate. Yang Yi turned off the music in the car and scanned the crowd with rapt attention. Soon, Yang Yi saw a small and familiar figure appear at the school gate. Of course, the bright yellow color of the clothes was also more obvious. Yang Yi smiled slightly, got out of the car, and crossed the road to welcome Xishi. Although Xishi knew where his car was, Yang Yi wouldn't let his daughter cross the road alone. Papa. When Xishi saw her father, she pouted her small mouth and pounced on him. What's wrong? Why are you so sad? Yang Yi was a little surprised. Wasn't the little girl in a good mood today? Why did she have such an expression after coming back from school? Moreover, Xishi was really sad. She stretched out her 2 small arms and asked her father to pick her up. Yang Yi picked up the little girl. Fortunately, his body was very tall and sturdy. Now Xishi, who had grown into a little beauty, was supported by his arm. She could still sit on his arm like when she was a child. Just like when she was a child, she hugged her father's neck and wiped her tears. Why are you so sad? Yang Yi asked puzzledly. Tell me what's going on. Because I forgot to write my name on the exam. Xishi pouted her small mouth and sadly whispered to her father about her experience. So the teacher gave you a 0? Yang Yi asked with some surprise. He frowned slightly. He didn't have much experience in the exam. He felt that the teacher was making a fuss over nothing. However, she shook her head and said, "No, the teacher didn't give me a 0, but she said that if I didn't write my name, I would only get a 0 in the future." Before Yang Yi could speak, the little girl continued. "Then the teacher asked me to write a self-reflection letter. She said that I knew I did something wrong. Then, after I finished writing, she asked Papa to take a picture and send it to the teacher." That's it. Yang Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry and asked, "The teacher asked you to write a self-reflection letter, but she didn't give you a 0, which means that the teacher forgave you. Why are you sad?" "It's not this." Cece refused to comply and hugged her father's neck, shaking her little head. She was still sad. How could her father laugh? Chapter 985. Why did she feel sad? Yang Yi soon found out. After they returned to the car, she got out of her father's arms and sat in the car. She took out her Chinese test paper from her small school bag and handed it to her father. 90 marks, not bad. Yang Yi roughly glanced at it and said with a smile, 90 marks, at least you're not a 0. But I didn't get 100 marks. She said unhappily, I got 100 marks in both math and English. It seemed that this was the only time she lost 100 marks in an exam this semester. Is it because of the essay? Look at the picture in the essay. 2 marks were deducted. Yang Yi turned over and pointed to the last question. He comforted her. It's okay. It's normal that you didn't get 100 marks. As long as you study hard, Dad doesn't care how many marks you get. No. She shook her little head. She blamed herself and said seriously, Chow Roland got 100 marks. The teacher said I didn't take the exam seriously. Look, I wrote it wrong. Yang Yi was speechless. She didn't do well in the exam. Why did she feel wronged? Since you know you shouldn't not take the exam seriously, then remember this lesson next time. Do the questions seriously in the next exam, and check them carefully. Then you can get 100 marks back. Yang Yi did not blame Shishi. He only encouraged her. Shishi was still a little unhappy that she didn't do well in the exam. However, her father's gentle comfort made her feel better. After returning home, Yang Yi taught Shishi how to write a self-reflection letter. Don't worry about the format. First, think about how to reflect to the teacher, and write down what's in your heart. For example, during the exam, I didn't do the questions seriously and was distracted. That was wrong. Or, I shouldn't have forgotten to write my name. What I should do, what I should do, what I should do, what I should write. If you don't know how to write, use pinyin to replace it. Yang Yi took out a piece of paper and placed it in front of Cece. After giving her some simple instructions, he smiled and said, After you write down everything you think of, Dad will teach you how to organize these words in your heart, and how to write them into the format of a self-criticism letter. If she learned the format from the beginning, Yang Yi felt that it would stifle the child's creativity. Therefore, Yang Yi gives she a chance to express herself freely. Of course, this opportunity was still a difficult thing for Shishi, who had never written a self-reflection letter. Yang Yi soon saw Shishi frowning. She sat at the desk and racked her brain. She didn't know how to write for a long time. The little girl was still quite obedient. Although she kept muttering, I don't know how to write. When she saw that her father didn't intend to help her, she still thought very seriously. At this time, Yang Yi was bored anyway. He picked up Shishi's winter vacation homework and the exam papers that she brought back today and looked at them. Shishi also brought back Lan Xian's exam papers. Yang Yi looked at Lan Xian's score. It was not bad. In the second half of the semester, the chubby girl worked hard with Shishi to do homework and study. Her progress was still great. After all, Lan Xian was also a smart child. Her previous grades slipped because she was lazy. Now, although she didn't get full marks in all 3 subjects, she maintained more than 90 points. Especially Chinese, Lan Xian actually got 92 points, which was 2 points more than Shishi. This made Yang Yi feel a little surprised. Did Shishi really do poorly in the exam because she was distracted? Therefore, Yang Yi picked up Shixi's and Lan Xian's exam papers and made a comparison. Xixi and Lan Xian's points were deducted for different items. Shixi's points were more scattered, and the first multiple-choice question was actually very simple. Xixi chose the wrong answer. Lan Xian's points were mainly deducted for her relatively weak writing. She actually wrote some words with missing strokes, especially for the essay. 4 points were deducted because she wrote 4 wrong words. Yang Yi compared and suddenly saw that Shixi's points were deducted by the teacher on the last question of the penultimate question. It was the open-minded question about how to let the kitten receive more small fish. When Yang Yi saw Shixi's answer, "You can tell Daddy. Daddy will buy a lot of small fish for the kitten." He couldn't help but laugh. "What are you looking at that makes you so happy?" Murphy noticed and curiously came over to join in the fun. "Look at this." Yang Yi took the exam paper and pointed it out to Murphy. Murphy looked and laughed, but she was puzzled and said, "I think Shixi's answer to this question is not wrong. This is also a way to solve the problem." Yang Yi nodded and said with a smile, "I don't think there's anything wrong with it either. You just said that Xian Air answered this question correctly. Let me see. How did Xian Air answer?" Murphy was interested. Yang Yi took out Lan Xian's Chinese exam paper. Lan Xian's answer was more standard. "You have to put the small fish in the water." At first, I thought of the same answer as Xian Air. We both thought that the small fish should be raised in the water, because it corresponds to the saying that they should be planted in the soil. This should be the standard answer. But to be honest, I still prefer Shixi's answer. It's more imaginative. Murphy defended Xixi. "How can Shixi's points be deducted for this question?" "I can't say that she's imaginative. I can only say that Shixi's ideas are more unique. But this is also a good thing. It's not a skill to think of something that everyone can think of. Shixi's answer is more innovative." Yang Yi nodded. "Tell the teacher to add Shixi's points back. They both have 3 points," Murphy said. Yang Yi had another idea. An hour later, Yang Yi finished guiding Shixi's self-reflection. He took Shixi's Chinese exam paper and told Xixi about the question that had deducted points for Xixi. "What do you think of this question?" Yang Yi asked with a smile. The little girl pouted her little mouth again. She pointed at her answer and said, "The teacher said that I did something wrong, but I don't think I did anything wrong." Xixi seemed to be afraid that her father didn't know what she was thinking, so she tried to explain. Because my small fish were bought by Papa. Why can't I let Papa buy small fish for me? Papa has a lot of money, so he can buy a lot of small fish. In this way, I can eat a lot of small fish." "You're not wrong to think like this," Yang Yi said gently. "You're wrong. It's just that the question was not explained clearly. The question maker hoped that the kitten could raise small fish through her own efforts, just like the farmer who farmed. Only by raising fish can you harvest a lot of small fish. But he didn't show it in the question. What do you think he asked?" Xixi read the question to her father attentively. "How can I let the kitten receive a lot of small fish?" Yes, if the question is about harvest instead of receiving, then the meaning of this question is very obvious. Because harvest refers to harvesting crops, collecting agricultural products, and getting the results that you worked hard to get, and so on, while receiving has many meanings. We can also use the word receive when we receive express delivery or other people's gifts. Xixi was still very absorbed in Yang Yi's words. Xixi could understand these words. Of course, Xixi might not be able to use them flexibly in the future. After all, she hadn't learned so many words yet. What I want to say is, in the context of such a question, if you answer like this and say that I can buy small fish for the kitten, it's like receiving a gift, so your answer is not wrong, Yang Yi said softly. The little girl looked at her father in surprise, with a trace of surprise in her eyes. She thought that she had done something wrong. I said this because I hope you can understand that sometimes when we have exams, the teacher's marks or the standard answers on the test paper are not necessarily accurate. You can have your own thinking, your own ideas, and your own answers. Yang Yi shook his fist at Xixi and said encouragingly, "Don't worry about whether the teacher will deduct your points if you put forward your own ideas like this. It doesn't matter. Having your own free and open mind, and thinking about things that others can't think of is more important than writing the standard answers and getting 100 points. I will also be proud of your wonderful ideas, Yang Yi said with a smile. It's like I'm telling you a fairy tale. Most of the time, magic doesn't exist in our world. If I say that I know magic, people will think that I'm ridiculous. However, if we can turn these wonderful ideas into works or realize them, it will be like the story of elder sister Elsa that I'm telling you. These ideas will become wonderful and great, Yang Yi said with a smile. Yang Yi's words made it easier for Shishi to accept. I know, Papa. I said it's okay to let Papa buy small fish for the kitten. The little girl stuck out her chest and giggled. She waved her little hands and said, then it can become a very interesting story, because the kitten will become good friends with me, and then teach me a lot of magic. Although she became interested and began to deviate from the topic, a smile appeared on the little girl's face. It seemed that the situation of losing points in the exam had become less depressing. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.